Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the MHA What If with another fanfiction. This is the move of What If Deku was Naruto? All credits for this video go to their respective authors, so please support the real author. Check out the link in the description for more details. Please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Naruto doesn't remember dying. He remembers winning for sure. Couldn't forget that, not in a million years. Odds stacked against them, against gods and immortals and undead bastards, his precious people fighting by his side like gods and mortals and shinobi. It had been awesome. Awful and heart-wrenching and infuriating, and fuck, he could still taste the blood and dirt and sweat on the back of his throat, choking, too much, desperate, and just about the worst thing ever. But awesome. Because they had won. They had won and were standing there in the wreckage of the battlefield days later because something heavy had been building in his chest, in his gut. He wanted to make sure they were gone. And then something in his chest, in his gut, it moved. It pulled and tugged and screamed inside him, twisting and wrenching. The world clicked sideways and he felt packed, jutsu-torn soil on the side of his face as he hit the ground, sun warm and blood cold. He remembers something inside of him giving. He remembers gasping wetly, weakly for air. Trembling and confused and remembering nothing but ghosts of things he should be feeling. Cold, then cold warm bright. He couldn't move anything, could barely wriggle. He knew something wasn't right. But it was warm. Felt safe. Which should have been a dead giveaway something was wrong, except it wasn't, because he couldn't think. Awareness comes back in pieces, slotting together through confusion. He feels drugged, thoughts and memories and feelings and images of the world around him slipping through his fingers. It takes a while to clear up. The first coherent thought Naruto has is Sakura-chan? Because things are confusing. But he remembers fighting, remembers winning, remembers outlines of light and chakra and killing intent so strong it almost brought him to his knees, and he remembers that something was wrong. Something felt wrong, felt bad. But he feels okay now. Groggy and weak and not quite all there, but okay. Which means Sakura-chan had to have fixed it, right? He looks for her. It takes a while to get that done properly, because everything is weird and heavy and bright. He's in a room. A room with pale yellow walls and pictures of bumblebees and suns and flowers and some kind of long-necked spotty horse that was probably a god or a summon animal, he's pretty sure. And it's all super big. He's in a prison too. Except it has wooden bars and no top, which makes it pretty much useless against shinobi and possibly civilians too. He admits he doesn't know much about civilian capabilities. His first mostly coherent string of thoughts start with Kakashi-sensei is a bastard, and I can't believe he managed to actually prank me. He's gonna get the bastard, because this is a very mean, very funny thing to do to someone who feels as weak as a baby right now. It's still kind of like he's swimming in oil or jello or something when he tries to think too much, but that's half a clue about what's going on in and of itself. Drugs and poisons don't really work on him. Not when he's functional and in good health. In fact, the only times they have are when he got his heart vaporized by Sasuke's Chidori and at the beginning of his training with the Fox's chakra and Arrow Sensei. Overworked chakra pathways. Not something that happens to him a lot, but not impossible. Stops his chakra from just purging the stuff from his system. So, there's probably been an attempt on his life, even if he can't remember it, and he's had to regrow most of his chest again, or something, and they're keeping him drugged up until something. He nods, then goes to run his fingers through his hair. Instead, he smacks himself in the face very softly with a chubby baby hand. What? He looks at his hand. He scrunches up his fingers. Then spreads them wide. It's tiny and chubby and soft in a way he isn't sure his had ever been. He waves it around. It takes about 3 days for it to finally click and 6 hours for him to stop trying to break the genjutsu. Because that's what this has to be. Has to. Except it isn't. And he can't even feel his chakra. It's a lot for a baby brain to process. It takes him a really, embarrassingly long time to stop being sad and trying to convince himself this isn't real and aggressively ignoring the world around him and letting his weird, strong baby emotions take over everything and start acting like a shinobi. Kakashi-sensei would be so disappointed and worried. Sasuke would call him an idiot, but that wasn't new, and Naruto would like to see him handle the shit with grace and control and whatever the opposite of a years-long, constipated emo phase was. So there. Sakura would probably just sigh at him. Or get angry. Probably both. He couldn't wait to tell them about this. Because he would, someday, even if only in the afterlife. And any time he thinks otherwise and his awful baby eyes get wet and drippy, he just thinks fuck you really loud and tells himself that he will even if he has to beat up the Shinigami to do it. Because honestly, aside from the baby thing at this point, he isn't convinced he can't beat the Shinigami up and make it happen. Or at least impress him enough for long enough that he gets to do whatever the hell he wants. In sum, that might be called arrogance. For Naruto, it's somewhere between idle musing and a promise. And Naruto Uzumaki doesn't break promises. So he starts training right away, wiggling his baby limbs and standing and falling over and hobbling around and falling over and failing to do a real push-up and mostly succeeding a couple of crunches until he's tired as hell and barely holding on to consciousness, falling asleep, drowsy in the afternoon sun. He takes a nap. He wakes up to soft hands and a soft voice and a round face with round green eyes and long, awesome, amazing, super cool green hair, and he feels safe. Did you have a good nap, Izukin? Khan brought your favorite, giraffe? She smiles at him, sun silhouetting her like a goddess, except the cool kind and not the evil kind, holding up a baby blanket with a yellow and brown head that looked kinda, in a baby blanket way, like the summon animal on his walls. He hadn't realized he'd been so out of it. He had a Kachan now. A real actual Kachan who was here and alive and who looked down at him with so much love it hurt to look at for too long and oh. His little baby heart feels like it's exploding and he opens his clumsy baby mouth and reaches out his clumsy baby hands and he smiles and he says, sounds all round and weird in his mouth like marbles or water balloons, ka. His Kachan starts crying and cooing and pulls him into a big warm safe hug and he can feel his heart breaking and burning and so bright he feels like he might die and he's crying and he's smiling and it's perfect. It's so perfect. He has a Kachan and nothing is ever going to hurt her. Naruto Uzumaki is Izuku Midoriya and he has his Kachan's green hair and green eyes. He has big freckles like he's never seen before and a round baby face with features he can't recognize and can't look at. And think of history and sacrifice and his parents, heroes, legends. He doesn't have whisker marks or orange around his eyes. He can't see anything of himself in his face. But he has his Kachan's green hair and green eyes and her big freckles and maybe he can forgive himself for not hating that it's not the same, looking in the mirror, wearing a soft yellow shirt and green shorts to match his Kachan's soft yellow shirt and green shorts. The shirts match, declaring them a plus ultra baby and a plus ultra mom and he has no idea what that means, but it sounds awesome. He even has a little bucket hat with frogs on it. He's guilty that he's so happy now. He stop help it. Not with baby emotions all big and tangled up and the world's most amazing Kung. He can babble little sentences now if he concentrates really hard. Khan lights up every time he does and he's so proud, little chest puffing up before he can help himself. He's learned what a giraffe is, too, from a picture book and a couple of stumbling questions. They're super cool but not as cool as toads. He thinks really hard when he tells Kachan this. Because he has to get all the words out right. She thinks it's the cutest thing she's ever seen, he can tell, because she smiles and giggles and ruffles his hair. And he smiles up at her until his cheeks hurt because his Kachan should be happy all the time. He'll make sure she's happy all the time as much as he can, because he's never had a real actual not dead for real Kachan before and she's everything he ever dreamed of in those cold, lonely nights before he for a real family, got Irika-sensei and Sakura-chan and Kakashi-sensei and Sasuke team and more and bigger until his heart was so full it couldn't hurt anymore. Until it didn't break on its own sharp edges when nights were too quiet and he was too hungry and his short nails dug red crescents into his palms that healed almost bloodlessly before he could ever see the damage because that was the only thing he could do but scream. He doesn't hate it here. Not that he could. His precious people would worry if he was sad. So he will live, for them, for himself, and because Naruto Uzumaki didn't give up so neither would Izuku Midoriya. The night is quiet, and he can't sleep. He can't move around a lot either, that might set off the weird baby monitor and wake up Kachan, and she looked really tired when she read him his bedtime story, which was about a hero with a cape who could punch things really good, like Sakura-chan. He spent a long time trying to find his chakra again, except he can't. Which is frustrating. And he feels like he's going to cry. But he doesn't, because then he won't be able to stop because of his dumb squishy baby body. Naruto feels stupid. He closes his eyes and focuses real hard, which has never been his best skill set, exactly. Intentionally directing that focus, at least, works about as well as directing the flow of a river. Mostly only something that can be done with Justu. He manages enough to feel himself start to slip, start to fall backwards. He opens his eyes to clear water around his calves and a big, open, dark space and bright yellow eyes. Kurama. His stupid baby mouth squeals, because of course this new body follows him here. He thinks the fox is going to eat him for a second, and then they look real hard at Naruto's baby body and then they sigh and flop into the water and start chuckling. Naruto scrunches up his eyes and tries really hard to make his body his old one again, because this is his mind and he should be able to make those kinds of decisions. But yeah, no such luck. Only you, brat. They growl, low rumble, feeling more like real home, like familiarity and warmth and family and safety, in a way he hadn't even realized was missing. It eases the slow buzzing of fear in his mind that says things should be different, that it all should be different, that none of this is right. Kurama, he says again, stretching out the word to pronounce it right. It's not as clumsy as it could be. He counts that solidly as a win. He's still a baby and his voice is high and not his own, except it is, but at least he can pronounce words. Mostly. I can't feel my chakra. Do you? He hesitates a second because that if it's really gone, do you know where it is? How I can find it again? He never had problems like this the first time. He was as much chakra as flesh and now it's gone. Like missing a limb. The fox looks thoughtful, tails licking through the air like flames and disturbing the nearly mirrored surface of the water, warm breath washing over him like their red chakra used to. No, they say at length. Naruto perks up. Ooh it. But I've been watching you. It's different here. Your soul is here obviously. They snort. But your body. Naruto thinks. He thinks of Kurama split in two. He thinks and he remembers how that feels and it isn't quite right. He remembers quiet afternoons and Sakura-chan telling him about chakra, about how it works, memory faded almost to translucence and hard to reach. He remembers until he gets a headache, baby brain not designed for this much information but processing it anyway, because when did Naruto ever listen to anything like reasonable limits? It's just my spiritual energy now. He says words fragile and unsure. Kurama looks proud but not surprised, because Naruto is pretty sure nothing he does will surprise the fox at this point, not since he opened the seal, since he pretty much killed a goddess, since they both learned all that weird, confusing cycle of hatred reincarnation mess. Also, Naruto isn't stupid. He's just hands-on. He isn't built for books and sitting around. But the coils, the pathways, spiritual energy alone can't make those. The air tastes different here. Your body feels they snort in frustration, different. If you can open them again, just our spiritual energy alone can't do it. The fox sounds tired. Can you open them? He asks, bouncing in place because no matter what life, what body, he never can sit still. The fox rolls their shoulders in place in a great big shrug. My chakra went through your system because of the seal, and it couldn't get in without something there in the first place. They eye him sardonically, closing one eye and settling their head onto their big paw hands. It's not human chakra, brat. Oh well, that makes sense. Maybe he can use Kurama's chakra anyway, just different. He yawns. He thinks he'll try in the morning though. His brain probably isn't supposed to be doing all this adult thinking. He walks over, toddles over, to Kurama and slumps, big paw hand shifting to catch him. It's warm and it's safe and it's soft and he closes his eyes and slips away. Naruto learns about quirks on TV, on a happy educational program that his Kachan turns on when she makes dinner. The TV is amazing. He had seen them before, but they were a civilian thing and never had much on and sure, movies were awesome, but he had training to do so he could be awesome. TV here is amazing and there's so much to see and so many different options. He knows because he got a hold of the remote for a while, skimming through channels before he accidentally switched to a horror movie and a loud scream played through the apartment, which was much better than his apartment or any of Ero-sensei's shady hotels or the long line of wartime camps. And Kuchan rushed in and very nearly had a panic attack, switching it back to something appropriate for his body's age. She scolded him lightly and put the remote up high, but she was so concerned about him and worried and anxious that he wouldn't have messed with it again anyway. He felt bad for making her, his Kun, his perfect amazing real not dead Kun, feel like that. Kids programming is easy enough to watch anyway. Things are so different now that he probably needs it just to understand that this world will be like. So he learns about phones and the internet and the countries of this world that, holy fucking shit, is absolutely massive. He learns about history in bits and pieces and that he should eat his vegetables, and he learns about quirks. He hasn't gotten his chakra to work again. Or Kuramas. Even though every time Kanan can't see, he does push-ups and squats and leg lifts and crunches and stretches, with sloppy and inefficient form, but he does them. Despite popular belief, he's not stupid. And he knows a toddler doing grown-up exercise is weird. He still can't get his chakra to work. Dread has started to set in. But quirks are amazing. They're super-duper awesome, believe it? And he spends a couple minutes excited because maybe he would get to breathe fire like Sasuke team, or get super strong like Sakura-chan, or do cool stuff with lighting like Kakashi-sensei, or grow trees like Yamato Taishu. And then he learns about heroes. There is nothing Naruto has ever wanted more in that moment than to be a hero, than to be the best hero, other than his early dreams of becoming Hokage. Maybe because that dream had been born of pain, of so much pain and so much loneliness and so much determination. And Naruto can read underneath the underneath. He can see that there are bad, dangerous people out there who are using their super cool abilities to hurt people. And heroes protect people. They defeat villains and they protect people, and they don't have to fight wars that chip away at everything they love or carve their souls to pieces for faceless clients or hurt hide run again and again and again. He may have willfully defied everything he hated about his world, about how the shinobi system worked, about how their nations were run. But that doesn't mean he ignored it. He doesn't pretend that this hero system is very likely anything but super messy and complicated, and he's sure there are probably bad parts. But heroes are all about helping people, the lady on the TV said. And about saving people. And about making things better. They didn't sound like soldiers. Like killers. Like the bloody, scary, ruthless, super cool shinobi that filled his village's propaganda, the image that was sold to the kids in his village until they all grew up and figured out that maybe too much of it was true. Being a hero sounds different. Not like shinobi heroes, shinobi legends, who were bloody and vicious conquerors who slaughtered legions. It sounds like peace. It sounds hopeful, sounds good. He hopes it's different from greed and war and blood and betrayal. He really does. Because it's everything Naruto has ever wanted to be and more. And it gives him something to fight for again. Something to protect and a big, bright goal to charge towards. Something he didn't even know was missing until he sees the pretty hero lady and hears her talk about what a hero is. He tells his Kuchan he's gonna be the best hero ever. He meets Kaken 2 months later, his third time down at the park. He sees Kurama's toothy smile and Sasuke team's red eyes and hair colored like Obachan's, softly spiky like Ero-sensei's, and he sees innocence and he sees determination and shit. Kaken is gonna be his best friend whether he wants to be or not. Red eyes widen when little Izuku tackles him, face stretched into a bright, sunny, determined smile, and asks if he wants to play hero. Poor kid never stands a chance. Izuku Midoriya is 4. Kaken got his quirk a couple months ago, bright and smoky and super cool. They had immediately incorporated it into long afternoons playing hero, which were actually long afternoons playing ninja but with some extra additions and a couple twists and maybe a bit less pretend bloodiness, because that's all Naruto really knows how to play. Everyone thinks he has the best ideas for games, and the best roles, and the best sneaky plans for pranks and traps, which is kinda unfair because he's lived a lot longer than the kids he played with. But it's okay, because they had fun splitting into teams and playing academy games. Izuku has fun too, Because when he was Naruto he always watched the other academy kids at the park and the clan kids and on their compounds having fun and laughing and playing. He never got to play. No one wanted to play with him. And fuck, he never got to have a childhood the first time around, not really, and if anybody thinks he's going to give that up now that he can, they're probably too dense to dodge a genin's kunai. His young emotions help, and sometimes he can even forget this is a whole different world and he'd been like 20 once and that being a kid again is kinda weird. Most of the other kids that were regulars at the park have their quirks now too. Only a couple don't, but they'll get them soon, they're all sure. The group uses them to play, Izuku carefully guiding them to manipulate their powers in ways that don't really hurt anyone that bad. He has to do it really carefully, has to be sneaky so they don't catch on. He's good at sneaky, even if most people who meet him don't think so. He'd had to be good at sneaky as a kid, as a teenager, during a war. He's just extra sneaky, because he doesn't like people to know he's sneaky. He hasn't figured out his chakra problem, and hasn't so much given that up as focused the energy he spent solving it elsewhere. Because he doesn't give up, believe it, but if it hasn't happened by now then he's better off training his body until he has a breakthrough. He also hasn't gotten a quirk yet. Some of the other kids have made fun of him, but it hasn't really hurt. Because he's a shinobi at heart, and he knows that even people without chakra like Lee or who hadn't used it much like Guy and they had been amazing, more amazing than most people. So even if he gets a really lame quirk and not a super strong one like the super amazing All Might, it'll be okay because he'll just train really hard like them. Also because he had been like 20 once and he'd lived most of that being called a lot worse than useless by people who could back it up a lot better than a group of 3 to 7-year-olds. But his Kachan is worried too, and that makes him sad. They're at the doctor's now. The doctor looks really sad and guilty and dismissive in a way that almost stings because it almost reminds him of people who had dismissed and hated him a long, long time ago. But it doesn't really hurt, because he'd proved them all wrong. Many times. And he'll do it all a fucking again, believe it? The doctor has an X-ray up, and is explaining that weird toes mean he'll never get a quirk. Izuku swings his feet between the legs of the plastic chair. It seems kinda dumb to him, but then so did most medical stuff, even back before he was reborn. Kan looks like she's about to cry though, and like she's trying really, really hard not to. Her hand hovers around her mouth, and she stares at him like she's scared he'd crumble, like Medic Neen did after a Genin's first kill. He smiles up at her, big as he can. It's okay, Kan. He gives her his best I can do it smile. I'm still gonna be a super strong hero. Like All Might, I just gotta train extra hard, okay? The doctor scoffs, quietly. Izuku hears it anyway. His Kachan does too because she starts shaking a little. He tells the doctor to fuck off. Kachan tries really hard to pretend she's mad, after she gets done choking on her own spit. The park is crowded today. Kaken runs up right away, because last time they hadn't had enough players for the heroes to face off in an epic battle to catch the runaway princess and her cunning bodyguards. The cunning bodyguards thought the heroes were really evil villain kidnappers who wanted to kill the princess to steal her country and stop her from using her super strong quirk to end an endless winter. And then they'd need enough players for the evil villains so they could have an epic showdown. Okay, so he's blatantly plagiarizing events of old missions. But that's not the point. They hadn't had players, so Kaken had gotten grumpy and then nearly Sasuke team level angry. Izuku had said that meant they could play hero tag instead, which was really ninja tag, which was normal tag but sneakier, and everyone was it. That had pacified him, but now Kaken's eager to try his Princess of Snow plot. Izuku is thinking though. He's thinking about whether he should tell Kaken about the doctor. It'll come out anyway. But he's heard how the other kids say the word quirkless. It isn't nice. He doesn't care about them at all, not really. But Kaken is one of his precious people. He remembers how Sasuke looked at him before he had proven how strong he was. He remembers when they met again years later, and Sasuke looked at him like he was nothing. He remembers how Sasuke left because he hadn't trusted his team to be strong enough. And didn't come back because he didn't change his mind until Naruto bested into him that they could be strong together. All the kids love to talk about quirks. Ever since Kaken got his, he started to get meaner and angrier and colder to people with weak quirks or villainous ones. This world looks at quirks like his hat at clans and Kekkei Genkai, and it burns in the back of this throat sometimes, How he just wants to yell and yell because he knows so many amazing, awesome, incredible shinobi who started with nothing, or started hated, or started feared. But he doesn't because… what would he say? He isn't good with words, not like the Sakura-chan is, or Shikamaru, or Ero-sensei. He doesn't have Lee or Sakura or Gar to beat people up and prove them wrong right alongside him. So, he'll have to prove it then. No matter what, he's gonna be the best hero ever. With a quirk or without one. He tells Kaken. Things take a while to come to a head. Nearly 2 months of worse treatment and snide remarks and potshots when Izuku's back is turned. Katsuki feels almost like a coward. But he isn't. Deku's the one who's useless. It's a week before school starts and Katsuki has had enough of stupid weak Deku saying stupid things. He's wrong. He can't be a hero without a hero quirk, like the one Katsuki has. So he tells him. Alone nearly at dusk at the back of the park in the trees, shouting and snarling and ranting until… Deku says with the biggest, stupidest, sharpest smile. I'll prove it. What? Beat me. Katsuki doesn't think. Katsuki charges, sweating from running around all day and ready to use it all to grind this stupid, weak nerd to dust. Deku takes a hit to the face and gets up screaming. They fight for a long time, both bruised and burned and bleeding and aching until Katsuki can't fight anymore, collapsing to the ground. Everything is shaking. Everything hurts. He's not sure he can move on his own now. Deku walks over to him, huffing out breath, face never breaking from that sharp, dangerous, fox grin. The little bruise on the side of his face from Katsuki's first hit is just starting to darken. See? Deku demands, voice heavy with determination, eyes blazing. In the bright pre-dusk sun, he looks like he's glowing. Katsuki sees. Katsuki is the one who's weak, who's useless, losing to a quirkless loser. His throat stings and he refuses to cry, he refuses. If his quirk's really that weak Deku laughs, sheepish and proud and happy. You're really strong too. That punch was super awesome. Katsuki blinks. His punch? Not his quirk? Deku offers him a hand, face almost lost in the bright orange streaming in through the trees. The forest around them is pretty wrecked. They're near the edge now, with all the running around driving them closer to the open center of the park. I'm gonna be a hero, the best hero ever, no matter what. Believe it? Deku says the words like they're true. A drop of blood from his split knuckles falls off the hand reaching out to him. We're gonna be great heroes, together. Deku smiles at him like he can make anything happen. Like he can tear down anything in his way. Like there's nothing in the world that could stop him, no matter how hard or how impossible or how much he shouldn't be able to, because he doesn't have a quirk, and somehow that doesn't even matter. Katsuki believes him. 2 warm, bloody, burnt palms meet. It feels invincible. It feels like the beginning of something. Deku is gonna be the best, and if he's gonna be the best, then Katsuki has to be the best too. Because there is no way he's gonna let this brilliant, impossible boy leave him behind. Their mothers are furious. The nightly news reports a villain attack in the park, given the level of damage. Their mothers are frantic. Neither boy says anything. And despite the bandages and the 3 broken fingers and 1 twisted ankle and 1 dislocated shoulder and pulled muscles and scuffs and the rock-induced stab wound and burns that will scar the both of them and the sheer exhaustion, neither stops smiling either. Kaken is kicking the shit out of a 12-year-old with a pretty cool lizard quirk who'd called Izuku weak, then said Izuku must be holding Kaken back so he's gotta be weak too. Literally kicking. Izuku doesn't stop him. 'Cause Kaken and he are both pretty buff for 6-year-olds, but they're still 6. He shouldn't be able to do any permanent damage with the kid curled up in a ball. So long as he doesn't find any weapons. Everyone is avoiding them, right now. Even the 12-year-old's friend who has super awesome crab hands. Once Kaken calms down they'll stop though. It's summer break and everyone's super excited, because Izuku Pinky promised he'd come up with a super cool game of hero for them all to play. Weirdly, it feels like Kohohamru all over again, sometimes. Even the kids who don't want to be heroes anymore and older kids like playing. Kachan is super proud of him for having so many friends. And he's having fun too. They're going to be playing hero exams, which are just his own chunin exams, except no fighting at the end and capture the hostage flag, except a person, because that'll be more fun. Instead, he wonders sometimes why Kakashi-sensei hated teaching so much. It's not that hard. There's an itch on the back of his neck, because for everything he's lost he still has shinobi senses, shinobi instincts. A kid is watching from the sidelines, half hidden behind a bench. He's Izuku's age, his body's age at least, and his eyes, they look like Gaara's. Like his. That's never good. So he'll have to fix it. He runs over, bright smile on his face, and waves. The kid withers behind the bench, but tufts of hair peek out with a single eye and one hand gripping the side. Kinda like Hinata-chan, before she went from super cool to mega awesome. It's unfairly cute. Hi. My name is Izuku. Do you want to play? His words are fast, almost running into one another, and he bounces on his heels. The boy mumbles something too quiet for him to hear. Izuku wrinkles his brow together. The boy takes a deep breath. It's a soft word, half broken, a little scared, mostly just confused. Cool. He pumps a fist in the air and laughs. What's your quirk? If you have one, it's okay if you don't too. See, 'cause you haven't met anyone yet, so if you tell me then I can help you pick the best team. He nods as fast as he can. He can see the boy's head spinning a bit, behind shuttered eyes. But that's kinda half the plan anyway. Just keep things moving until they start losing balance and either start having fun or start letting the bad thoughts bubble up so he can kick their ass. Patented Naruto Uzumaki method. The kid shifts like he's gonna run off, tugging purple hair away from purple eyes with white pupils that remind him even more of Hinata-chan, and talks like he's grinding his fist against concrete. Brainwashing. I make people do things. And okay, he doesn't know all the details yet, but awesome. That's so cool. Believe it. I bet it's super useful too. Can you help people with stage fright? I think Kaken gets it sometimes 'cause he gets all tense and mean, and he won't say he does 'cause that would be silly for someone so cool. But it's okay, I bet all sorts of heroes get stage fright. But then he starts yelling about how he super duper doesn't. Izuku babbles, he thinks of how many lives that could have saved. How valuable an extra minute, an extra second was. He thinks of Sasuke team running himself back to the village and of enemies spilling their secrets. He thinks of just asking Kakashi-sensei to give him the bells, and he thinks about attacks that could have been deflected before they landed, of comrades saved. He thinks about secrets and lies and about Danzo freezing long enough that they could destroy him. He thinks about collateral damage and how much there shouldn't have been. And then his thoughts snap in another direction, because the kid looks like he just took a punch to the gut. He's shaking. And Izuku realizes this is a villain quirk, because people are stupid and too easily scared, and he feels like punching something because people are stupid. He doesn't. He snatches the kid's hand up with a bright, too bright, up to max smile, and drags the stumbling little bundle of painful similarities back to the group that's gathered around Kaken because they think he has secret inside knowledge of Izuku's games and Izuku had disappeared for a bit. Kaken, look. He's gonna play with us too. His quirk is super cool, believe it? Izuku can feel the kid panicking, trying to tug himself away, scrambling, and grips harder and charges ahead. Super duper cool. It's called brainwashing. The kid is shaking, all eyes are on them. He tries to pull away weakly and Izuku does not let go because they're friends now. He's decided, and he helps his friends. Kaken frowns and grunts, but it's his thinking frown and his begrudgingly cool grunt. Izuku smiles bigger and his cheeks would start to hurt now, but he's like this all the time so his muscles are used to it. That's a villain quirk. Is he gonna play the villain then? One kid asks, a boy whose quirk is blowing bubbles, which reminds his a little of Saiken every time. The kid behind him is frozen like he's ground down into the dirt and Izuku can almost feel him trying to shrink into himself. He's not having any of that today though, nah. Izuku adopts his best thinking pose, hand on his chin and face screwed up. 'Cause it's super heroic. See, he lets the pause drag on, all eyes are on him, anxiously anticipating his glorious wisdom. He can make a villain pull his pants down. The kid hand squeezes as he splutters a choked laugh, almost half a sob, and yeah, he's gonna be this kid's best friend and drag Kaken in too, and then he'll have the best, Strongest friends ever and no one will ever bully him again. Just you watch. He could make a villain just walk right into jail and close the door. The Saiken kid shouts. He could make a villain pee his pants. People are joining in now, dog piling in the way kids are best at. He could make a villain expose his real identity right there. He could make a villain punch himself in the face. Or not use his quirk anymore. Or do all his chores. I wish I had a quirk like that. Then I could be like a super cool PI hero. I'd solve lots of mysteries. He could just say to confess and then the villain would. The kids took it up on their own, trading ideas that get weirder and wilder each go around, some looking at the new kid with big starstruck eyes. Izuku lets go and turns to the kid with a big, bright, sharp fox grin. He's crying, but Izuku pretends he doesn't hear the sniffle or see the bald hands scrubbing at his cheeks. No one's gonna be alone or hated or feared or looked down on because of their quirk, not while he's around, believe it. Then Izuku laughs sheepishly, overhearing and ignoring Kaken's idea that the kid could just tell the villain to go die already with the ease of practice and long desensitization to violence and death. He wonders if he's a bad influence. Hey, I'm sorry, I forgot to ask, what's your name? The kid blinks at him like he's just asked the most out there question in the world. He waits. 1 beat. 2 beats. Idiot. Kaken growls at him and not the kid or there might be a problem. Useless dumbfuck. Izuku wonders, absently, where he learned that word and if his house has a swear jar. Kaken turns to the new kid. Tell me your name. He demands. Please see. Izuku wheedles. The kid looks at Izuku, then at Kaken, then back at Izuku. Hitoshi. He mumbles, syllables falling almost monotone. Hiya, Toshi. Izuku grins, half knife sharp and half sunny. I'm Izuku and this is Kaken. He nods at Kaken. It's Katsuki, Deku? Kaken isn't pouting because he doesn't pout. Obviously. You're gonna be on our team. He nods like the decision is made. Behind him, someone yells that they want him. Kaken starts sparking and they shut up. Toshi looks lost and a little scared and pretty overwhelmed and he shuffles until he's half hiding behind Izuku, which is adorable. He turns to the crowd and tries to look intimidating. It works pretty well, even in a 6-year-old body, because he was a commander once and maybe it doesn't help that he can still generate a mild killing intent that he dulls down even more, because they're kids, and he doesn't want anyone to have to leave because they peed their pants. He grins bloody, like Inko and Zabuza and Yamadatesh. So this is how it's gonna go. He whips a small stack of papers out from the light summer jacket that he'd worn just for this dramatic reveal. The kids look intimidated. And determined. Now all he has to do is teach Toshi how to spot really obvious cheating. He wonders, not for the first time, as he starts to explain the rules, how many kids he's convinced to be heroes. And how many he's given a huge and maybe kinda unfair leg up on the competition. Katsuki is 7 and wonders, sometimes, if Deku's quirk is his people skills. He knows it isn't, not really, because that would be stupid and because he feels the same about Deku all the time, even when he's not with him. Which means it can't be a quirk effect, he thinks. And because not even the nerd could control a quirk that well that fast. He's doing his 5th lap around the park, watching Deku talk to one of the kids clustered around a board game. The nerd is jogging in place. His eyes sweep over the rest of the kids around the picnic tables. Some are chatting, others involved in various intense and weird contests. He puts his head down and picks up the pace. He thinks about the fights over who was going to play hero and who was going to play villain that stretched so long that for a week, they barely got to play anything at all. And he remembers Deku showing up with a jar of sticks and a list of super weird stuff. Fighting, board games, rock paper scissors, camouflage, bubble blowing, number guessing, coolest fact, flower arranging, running laps. Nonsense shit. Winners got to be heroes. Losers were villains. And fuck it, it worked. No more fighting. And everyone got better at specific stuff, at all of it, whatever. He's seen others trading tasks so they could show off when they were really good at something. Katsuki wonders, often, if Deku has a plan for all this shit. It doesn't seem like it. Most of the time. But sometimes the little shit smiles until his eyes are slits, all teeth and savage victory, and Katsuki wonders. Sometimes, this all feels like it means something more. Hitoshi isn't far behind him, breathing heavier than him but still pushing on determinedly. Deku doesn't have to do laps today. He's still jogging in place. Like a lunatic. He hears Deku laugh, bright and brilliant, and remembers him laughing like that with his ankle all bandaged up to match Katsuki's shoulder, black eye covering at least a third of his face, 2 fingers set in splints, bouncing up and down and never asking him to apologize for anything, for any of it, even if he definitely should have. They beat the shit out of each other, and now they're friends forever. Still makes him embarrassingly warm and squishy even though it's been like 2 years now and he should be over it. Deku never asks him to call him by his name again either, laughing like it's their secret, cool inside joke when he yells it because the stupid nerd won or snuck up on him again. He never asks the idiot to call him anything else either, because this is theirs. Kaken is a baby name, but Deku doesn't think he's a baby, so it's okay if he uses it. He thinks about Hitoshi trembling in fear he can almost smell and then in awe. He wonders if that was on purpose too. He wonders if he'll ever figure it out. He wonders if Deku even knows. He lets Hitoshi pass just to sweep a leg out from under him and pass again, laughing. Hitoshi gets up and throws a rock at him, which smarts a bit as it bounces off the back of his head. He can hear light chuckles behind him fade for a second before the other kid starts forward again, picking up the pace. They're friends too, in a weird way. Different from Deku, but then everything's different from Deku. Hitoshi never asks him to quiet down, he can't. He doesn't know how people choose how loud they are, he can't even tell the difference when he speaks, or be less competitive. It's fun and it feels good to win, and when he loses it feels good to have something to work towards, or stop protecting everything that's his, mostly with his teeth or his fists. He doesn't ask Hitoshi to talk more, he thinks maybe Hitoshi can't speak at all sometimes, or pretend he's not scared. How's he gonna know who to hurt for making his friends feel bad if they hide that they're feeling bad? Or to stop avoiding everything all the time, mostly grown-ups and loud noises, but it's okay because Katsuki is bigger than Hitoshi so he can hide behind him if he needs to. Hitoshi called him Kaken once, last week, all weird and quiet and still, and Katsuki would almost say scared but they're friends so he can't be scared of him. That's ridiculous. Katsuki didn't fry him within an inch of his life, just huffed a little. He feels like that's all he needs to say. Izuku is 8, almost 9, when he kills someone for the first time. Naruto killed people, not often and never when it wasn't necessary, but he'd done it. He hated it then, but he did it without flinching because that was what a shinobi did. He's still too much a shinobi now, something he really doubts he'll ever shake. He still doesn't flinch. Izuku Midoriya gets his first kill earlier than Naruto Uzumaki did, in a world that's supposed to be more peaceful. They're cutting through an alley home. It's not dark yet, just pre-dusk enough that the sky is graying and the shadows are thickening, but it isn't dark quite yet. Toshi and Kaken are coming with him because it's not a school night and he will happily admit he thinks sleepovers are the best ever. He keeps to himself that as his brain grows he remembers more vividly. He keeps to himself that sometimes when he wakes in the dark, half from sleep so light it almost couldn't be counted, disturbed by light creaking or tapping from their upstairs or downstairs neighbors, and half gasping awake like he's drowning from nightmares that leave vague impressions of desperation and failure and blood and dirt and sweat at the back of his throat, and it's just him there alone. He has to stop himself from driving the knife he keeps under his pillow into his leg to prove this is real, into the eye on an enemy that's just the shadows of his adjusting vision, stop himself from diving out the window to safety before he can remember truly that he doesn't have chakra to help him stick to the walls or brace his landing. 2 softly breathing forms ground him quicker than anything he can do alone ever could. But he doesn't say this, because what would he say? How could he explain? They're cutting through the alley and a man, a shadow, snaps out an arm and hits Kaken in the chest like a sledgehammer. Izuku presses himself against the wall, almost scared but falling into old patterns too quick to be, and watches dark eyes dismiss him with a sneer. He's used to being dismissed. Quirkless and therefore harmless. A stupid mistake. He's 8 and he's built for 8, but he's still 8. This man is easily twice his height and twice his weight, and he has a length of metal pipe in one hand and he has to be careful. He can't afford any stupid mistakes. Toshi is frozen, choking on his words audibly. The man makes a half swing at him, a threat, and laughs. You'll shut up if you know what's good for you? Kaken might be concussed, if not knocked out, because he doesn't say anything and there are no bright blooms of light and sweet smoke, no reassuring pop 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 of badly repressed rage. The man turns and squats over Kaken, fishing in an inside pocket of his jacket. Got lucky here. The shadow laughs to himself. Most kids don't play with their quirks out in the open like that. Lucky me, I found something worth selling. 2 expensive brats and a blank canvas. Izuku's mind stutters. Quirk trafficking. He thinks of Sai. He thinks of Danzo. He thinks of the Kiri purges and Hinata in a sack in Orochimaru. Something in him he hasn't felt in 8 long years burns stirs. Fury, true fury, the kind that brought down Gaara and Nagato and that had earned him the only scar he carried with him for most of his life, a branching nest of lighting and bulging pink and white flesh over his heart because he was too furious to dodge. The kind that used to call up Kurama's power without thought when he still had a body with fucking chakra pathways. He will not let his friends be taken. He has a kitchen knife in his pocket, long and heavy because being without a weapon feels wrong now that the real horror of his old life has started to etch itself in. If the anatomy in this world is the same, if this man's quirk doesn't mess his insides around, then Naruto knows just where to strike between the ribs to reach the heart. He gives himself one breath to steady his shaking, still his rage and fear that isn't for himself and exists only for his friends, his team. He lunges, silent, feels Toshi's eyes on him and ignores them and pushes the blade in deep and twists and pulls it out and keeps it ready just in case that wasn't the man's heart, in case his aim is wrong or the anatomy is wrong. The man lurches around, pipe swinging where Naruto definitely isn't stupid enough to still be standing. For half a breath he thinks he got it wrong. The man collapses, crumples to the ground like the wet sack of meat he is now, or will be soon. He breathes out, tentatively, and waits a beat. Then another. He needs a phone, needs this man's phone because he doesn't have one, but like hell he's touching a man who might still be alive enough to be a threat when Naruto's the only thing protecting them right now. If Naruto is hurt, he won't be able to protect his friends. He needs to protect them. But he needs the phone. He puts his knife close enough to the throat that if the man moves he can make sure he doesn't get up again. He has to turn him over to find the device. Jacket pinned under his body since he'd collapsed face first into the concrete, hands slipping and bloody and refusing to let go of the knife to get a better grip on slick glass. He calls the emergency line, stammering out something that incoherent less than half from shock and more because he knows, he's a shinobi and he knows, that children shouldn't be cold-blooded killers. He shouldn't be able to brush this off. An 8-year-old civilian who has never seen war, never fought for his life and for his people just to survive, shouldn't be able to handle this. His body agrees with that sentiment even if his mind doesn't, painted too red for too long. He stammers out something about a kidnapper and a bad man and blood and so much blood and a knife and where they are and he's only half paying attention really. He drops the phone, the voice on the other end is panicked but he should be hearing sirens soon and that's all that matters. He smiles at Toshi, who's trembling, knees up to his chest, hands clamped over his mouth like they're welded there and tears down his cheeks. He doesn't think it's as reassuring as he would really like it to be. But Kaken is hurt and he's hurt and he needs help first. A blonde head almost flops to the side as he gets nearer, red eyes barely visible behind blonde hair, cast in silhouette by the shadows of the alley. Kaken? He cups his friend's face in one hand. Red eyes skitter over him like they can't quite find purchase. Kaken, I need you to stay awake. Help's coming, Kaken, okay, so you gotta stay right here with me? His voice is soft, unwinding like threads and fraying, not as calm as he needs it to be. Kaken is hurt, some kind of head wound, and he can't fix that. He remembers a shinobi with a half-concave skull dying in his arms after the battle was over, waiting for the medics. She'd drawn fire from the group and taken out all her opponents, but the one whose head Naruto had turned around like a doll, desperate to get to his downed comrade. She'd saved so many in that ambush. You can't leave, Kaken. If you leave you won't ever get to beat me. He doesn't sob but he hears it in his voice. His eyes are clear, because tears mean the split second between life and death. Kaken still hasn't said anything. Come on, you're stronger than me, you gotta prove that, right? I beat you last time. You gotta grind me into the dirt next time. Kaken slurs out something that sounds aggressive, and throws up all over himself. Naruto almost laughs, head foggy with relief, and gently feels the back of Kaken's head to check if there's bleeding. There is, he doesn't know how bad, and he applies as much pressure as he's comfortable with. He hears sirens. He also hears footsteps at the mouth of the alley. A fast swish of fabric ducking and fluttering. He sees red eyes glowing in the dark and long, messy hair, and he has a knife in his hands and he throws it. He doesn't know if it's the surprise or the movement or the angle or the fact that he's a kid, but it hits, lodging itself in a shoulder half turned out of the way a second too late. He hadn't been aiming for a shoulder, but it's probably a good thing his aim is a little off. A very good thing. He recognizes the man 2 beats later, a hero, and his shoulders slump. The man's face is blank. He doesn't take the knife out and tries not to move the shoulder, smart, as he approaches just a tad more cautiously. He doesn't seem to see Toshi, who's in half cover behind some mess of trash bins, tucked into the same corner the man had hidden from them, and Naruto is proud for a split second that even paralyzed by fear Toshi thought to find cover, to hide, to get safe. The hero sees the body though, eyes open to the sky and utterly empty. Naruto can't find it in himself to be mad that some part of him is pleased. No one gets away with hurting his precious people unscathed. The hero pauses and then turns away, focus back to them. The man, Eraserhead, not Madara, not Obito, not Itachi, crouches down. He gestures to his shoulder lazily. Lucky shot there, kid. It's cynical and dry and most definitely not the right thing to say to an actual child. Naruto laughs, a choking snort that evolves into a heaving chuckle. Sounds a bit like he's going to throw up. He's dead, Naruto says, a little breathless, after the chuckling subsides with all the grace of a sharp dive off a tall cliff. The only light inside the alley is the phone, still lit up from the call, man still babbling emptily on the other end, bloody smears diluting the light and shading spots of it red. Kaken says something, words forced out angrily around a heavy tongue and near entirely incomprehensible. It sounds very much like a death threat. Eraserhead's eyes are drawn quicker than his own, because he's watching the hero, but he starts speaking to Kaken before his eyes move. If you stay awake until the ambulance gets here, he thinks of anything he can say that'll be persuasive enough, and he knows he's thinking like a shinobi and not a civilian, but he says it anyway. I'll let you dislocate my arm next time I do something stupid. Kaken's grunt is almost a purr and Naruto doesn't laugh. He doesn't, but some hysterical part of him thinks Kaken would have made a great shinobi. This does not comfort Eraserhead at all. Toshi, finally, sobs. Naruto doesn't look, doesn't turn his head, but he can tell a lot just by the sound. Choked, wet sobs muffled by 2 hands around his mouth and chin. Naruto is so sorry he had to see this. He's not shaking because he has a shinobi's composure, but it hurts and he's so sorry. Izuku's a kid, an innocent, he should be shaking, should be reacting to this. He's more Naruto than Izuku now. He lets himself start, trembling arms and shoulder and legs, but it doesn't reach his hands, one on Kaken's cheek and the other in his hair and wet with blood. There are things more important than what he should be doing, and Kaken is one of those things. I'm sorry, Toshi. His voice shakes, and it's less of an act than he'd like to admit. He looks at red eyes glaring up at him, desperate and hurt and furious, until he can almost see them with spinning Tomo, and he can't, and he has to watch the brick instead. He hears choking and gurgling and hears Eraserhead move and Toshi whine like he's dying and something wet hitting the concrete, and the scent of bile gets stronger. He's so sorry. He can see lights in his peripherals, eyes moving slowly from shadowed brick to Eraserhead as he picked Toshi up with his good arm. He can hear cars braking hard and Eraserhead's silhouette blocks the light from the street as he slides out of the alley. He hears voices, but all he can see now is the blood on Kaken's cheek, and he feels awful, because they both had to see that. Even if there wasn't another way, they both had to see that. He hopes Kaken's head wound is bad enough that he won't remember. Kaken starts growling at him. It's okay, Kaken, the doctors are here. It's going to be okay, he says, voice firmer than it's been all evening. One clumsy hand knots itself into the side of his shirt and Kaken growls again. This one is possessive, he recognizes it. He laughs and doesn't try to remove the hand, doesn't even think about it. The doctors have to take them out together, because Kaken bites deep into the arm of the first paramedic who tries to untangle them, moving surprisingly quick and screaming as he latches on. They don't panic much, to their credit, and Kaken only lets go because he has to vomit again. Which he does on the paramedic and not on Naruto, and he's hilariously grateful for that. They patch them up at the hospital. He isn't hurt, really. Apparently he'd cut himself a little trying to flip an adult corpse over with a knife in one hand and he hadn't noticed. But it isn't big, doesn't even need many stitches. Kaken starts frothing the moment Naruto is more than 5 feet away, though, so the doctors do the smart thing. Apparently the head wound isn't that bad, busted open more because the brick was rough and sharp than because of how hard he hit the wall. He'd been hit in the chest by the pipe though, and had bit his tongue enough for it to swell up pretty nastily. A bad combination, especially short-term, but not life-threatening and not even truly that serious. They give Kaken some of the nice pain meds and leave, because he hasn't said a word and Kaken is out. It's probably a busy night. He doesn't see Toshi for a while, he's not sure how long. There's a clock, but he doesn't look. His eyes are pinned to the door. Toshi comes in with Eraserhead on his heels, brows scrunched up over purple eyes and looking like he's about to commit the murder Naruto actually had, and he freezes when he sees them, for a moment. Naruto pats the end of Kaken's bed, where he's sitting cross-legged even though he has a bed of his own because the press of their legs together, even through the thin hospital blankets, reassures him his friend is alive. Toshi moves as fast as he's ever seen the boy, hesitating once he's there, and Naruto curls the hand that isn't squeezing Kaken's in purple hair and tugs him down, head on his lap. His fingers scratch lightly, and Toshi is still stiff. "No one can hurt you now," Naruto says like he means it, like he'll tear apart anyone who tries. Like the man who commanded armies because it's been so long since he's been like this and he can't seem to let it go, can't find his way to Izuku again, or even to the man he'd been once the battle fell away and the sentries had been set. Once it was him and his precious people and a good meal and awful gossip. He can't shake off the urge to bare his teeth and cloak himself in chakra even if he doesn't and can't, and a bit distantly he realizes that's why. Because he can't feel the warm weight of his chakra in his veins, in the air, shrouding him and buzzing like the static of cyclones. Eraserhead notices, red eyes pinning him with a look that's almost casual, and that probably would have seemed to be if he wasn't a shinobi, hadn't known Kakashi for so long. He resists the strong urge to curl his lips and show this man his fangs. Barely. Because impulse control has never been his strong suit. But he doesn't really care that the man is looking at him like that because he feels Toshi crumble piece by piece until the taller, slimmer boy is folded in his lap and around Kaken, back turned to Eraserhead to manage it, and Naruto smiles because these are his precious people, and if he has to tear someone's throat out with his teeth because that's all he has right now, he will. Because they trust him to keep them safe. Eraserhead sits down on the other bed. In the fluorescent light, he looks exhausted. Naruto's seen nicer corpses. He also has his shoulder bandaged, and Naruto only tries so hard to smother the laugh in his throat. He doesn't do a very good job. Eraserhead relaxes, a little, shoulders slumping. For a moment, Naruto looks at him and sees Kakashi. He blinks and it's gone, but he doesn't forget, and it's easier to meet Red Eye's head-on after that. He wouldn't say anything. Eraserhead says when the air gets a little less heavy. Naruto smiles again, warmer but not bright, not shining, proud and worried, and his fingers dig deeper into Toshi's hair. His quirk, he starts, words folding off his tongue heavy and wary. He controls people, sometimes. When he wants to. His eyes drill into Eraserhead, but the only thing that changes in his face is soft understanding, like pieces clicking together. Naruto finishes his statement. The man said he should be quiet. Eraserhead's eyes flash with something like hate, still watching Toshi's now trembling form. He says nothing. Then he takes a breath. Can you tell me your names? We need to notify your parents. Naruto can respect that. He thinks he can respect this man. Against his leg, Toshi shakes his head so shallowly he's nearly sure Eraserhead misses it, especially with his own hands still moving. It's enough for Naruto. He knows how to shut up about something. My name's Izuku Midoriya, and that's Katsuki Bakugo. Eraserhead nods. And the boy in your lap? Naruto says nothing. Nothing they can legally do to him would make him talk, and unless they've got some sort of super secret truth serum, he doubts any interrogation experts they had would even get close to making him have a single second thought on matter. Not, he reminds himself, that they would set any of those on a civilian child. This country might not even have interrogation experts, not like his village had. We need to let his family know, so they don't worry. He tries. Naruto stares him down flat. By the lack of wilting, he figures that's either not as impressive as it used to be or Eraserhead has bigger balls than most of the chunin he's met and a fair portion of the jounin. There are medical reasons too, it's important we know. None of you are in any trouble. He wheedles. Toshi shakes his head again. Naruto doesn't need to know why. I don't know it. He shrugs. But you know his quirk? Eraserhead raises an eyebrow. He's sure he's supposed to be intimidated. He isn't. He shrugs again, eyes sharp like broken glass. I don't know it. Eraserhead sighs, deeply. Naruto doesn't even fight a snicker. It sounds exactly like the sigh of a genin team that just got another Tora D rank. I'll get someone to call your parents. He leaves. He comes back half an hour later, roughly, with an armful of chips and little wrapped-up vending machine pastries and a couple flavored milks. None of them have moved. Naruto's pretty sure Toshi's asleep now though, and he's starting to feel a bit more like Izuku now that his friends are here and his friends are safe. There's an officer behind the hero with a cool trench coat and a notepad. Eraserhead lays the food next to him like an offering and sits back down on the other bed. The man stares the officer into doing the same. The nice policeman is here to talk to you about what happened. Eraserhead nods at him, eyes gentle and speech a bit clumsy. Probably not used to dealing with kids then. The officer glares at him and turns back to Naruto. I'm Detective Tsukachi, none of you are in any trouble. I just want to know what happened. Can you tell me? His voice is soft and even. Naruto nods and speaks low, almost a whisper. Just be quiet please. They need to sleep. The officer nods and Eraserhead watches him like Kakashi-sensei watched Sasuke. He's not sure what it means and right now he doesn't really feel like guessing. We were walking home. My home. We were gonna have a sleepover. He smiles at the two men and Tsukachi hides a wince well but not well enough. He feel like this is gonna wreck the man and only feels a little guilty for it. There's a shortcut through this alley. It was getting dark and I wanted to get home before Kachan started worrying. So we went down. The man stepped out of, he shrugs, the shadows I guess. Didn't really see. But he hit Kaken. And he threatened dashed. He nods to his friend wrapped up in his lap and on top of Kaken's legs. Eraserhead twitches half a smile at the lack of a name. He barely looked at me. I don't have a quirk. He was watching us at the park, he said, so I guess he saw. There are two sharp intakes, one much better concealed than the other. He's not sure what part of that information is the most concerning to them. This world has strange priorities. He thought I couldn't hurt him. But I had a knife. We were doing paper cutting games today. I guess I was lucky. He frowns. Lucky he had an excuse. Kids carrying around kitchen knives is weird. Not illegal. But it would be very weird for him to do it without a good reason, and seeing as he just killed a man, he's trying to avoid weird. He crouched down over Kaken. He said something. He was going to sell us. He looks at one pair of aching eyes and another hard like grinding stone. He was going to sell us for our quirks. He takes a breath and can't keep the rage out of his voice. He was going to hurt us more and sell us, and I had a knife and I dashed. He shrugs. He looks at his friends. I'm sorry, he says. And he is. Not to the man or the people who had to clean up, or out of any twisted sense of morality that would have said being sold was better than defending his friends and his life. He's sorry, he's so sorry that his friends had to see that. The room is silent, for a little while. I don't have a phone, Naruto says, and he lets his voice shake, lets his hair hang down over his eyes. It's not an act, mostly. His young body isn't handling this well and he's refused to leave Kaken long enough to wash off the blood. He's in a hospital gown, so at least he doesn't have sticky, bloody fabric drying onto his skin. It isn't much of a consolation prize. Baby wipes haven't done nearly enough to remove browning streaks and the scent of iron and the stiff feeling on his skin. But grown-ups have phones. I had to turn him over to find it. Eraserhead winces harder than the officer. He notes in his periphery, watching Kaken's chest rise and fall steadily. I called for help. You came first though. He looks at Eraserhead, sheepish even as he starts to tear up, remembering the blood on Kaken's cheek and Toshi almost choking on his own vomit to keep his mouth covered. He laughs a little wetly. Lucky shot. He says like it's a joke, even if he kinda knows it has to be true, because you can't possibly be a pro hero if you can't dodge a fucking knife. Eraserhead answers him with the smallest grin. Lucky shot. He agrees gently. Sorry. I hope I didn't hit anything important. Eraserhead stretches his shoulder gently. Nothing I can't live without. It's almost a joke. He laughs anyway. Tsukachi looks like he disapproves, but he looks too shaken to say anything. It seems like you were very lucky tonight. The officer offers him a very weak smile. What you did was very brave. You were lucky you hit where you did. He's in surgery now and all of you should be able to walk out of here just fine. We'll put him away though. He'll never be able to do that again. Naruto tastes blood and bile in the air, the stench of the tiny alley, remembers dead eyes and knows exactly where he hit. He looks the man in the eyes. He's dead. The man flinches like he was struck and Naruto wonders what dead shinobi eyes look like on a child, except he knows, and he tries not to remember. I moved him. But he's dead. The officer can't meet his eyes. Eraserhead can. He's dead, he says in a soft, rough voice. He looks at the man and he knows. He knows he understands. At least in bits and pieces, he understands. He sees that the hero is mourning for something in him that he'd long since grieved. He smiles at him, shaking and grateful. But the shaking doesn't reach his hands, doesn't reach his legs, nowhere it can touch his friends. He doesn't pretend Eraserhead won't notice. Kaken wakes up not long after they leave, still a little high, and neatly and consensually dislocates Izuku's shoulder because they both know that this night has been a tall list of stupid decisions, even if some of them had saved all of their lives. He'd promised, and this also saved weeks of seething. Plus, he gets to teach Kaken something new, and pretends he doesn't know Kaken will use this knowledge the next time someone tries to bully one of his friends. Toshi isn't happy, but he doesn't stop them, and even laughs a little when Izuku politely corrects his friend's grip. The nurses don't see it, but they're deeply disappointed in him for getting hurt in their nice, peaceful hospital. He thinks he sees Eraserhead's shoulders shaking as the man passes the doorway and sees Izuku chipper and chatting away at the very distressed woman setting his shoulder. He's a bit busy explaining in great detail how he'd just fallen off a chair really bad, promise. See, the chair was even on its side. The doctor buys it. He's pretty sure Eraserhead doesn't. And then Kachan charges in, sobbing and furious and gentle and oops. He's probably going to get coddled until forever. The thought is warmer than he thought it would be. Hitoshi Shinso is 9 and his muscles are burning. He's lightheaded with exhaustion and adrenaline, and he's just done his first set of 200 push-ups. Izuku and Kaken are cheering as he flops over on his back, shaking. Izuku drags him upright, props him up against his all-might beanbag chair. Kaken presses a wet rag that feels like heaven against his forehead with a worried twist in his brow and a proud, savage smile. He holds the cloth there because Toshi's arms are on fire and he's not entirely sure he can lift them. He doesn't particularly want to try. Izuku is vibrating and smiling like he just won the lottery and helps him take a big gulp of water. The other two are sweaty, Kaken from weights and Izuku from leg lifts. But this is a victory for him, for them it feels like. Concrete progress. They all used to exercise, push-up competitions in the park and races and climbing trees for hours. It's different now. Now they're training. Training to be heroes so no one can hurt them ever again, so they can save people. Like Izuku had saved him. He remembers that night in so much detail and he wishes he didn't. Nightmares and shaking and the fear of the dark that he just can't get rid of linger even a year and a half later. But he remembers Izuku saving him, saving all of them. And yeah, he remembers blood and empty dead eyes and fear like fangs sinking into him and choking him. He remembers the look in Izuku's eyes when he darted away from a hit that came seconds late. How he'd grimaced flipping the corpse over like he did when they were lugging buckets of water balloons in the park, and how he smiled at him, covered in blood and illuminated by pale light from the dropped phone. Too easy, too simple, too casual. How could he smile after doing that? How could he handle it when Toshi barely can years later and he hadn't done anything? He'd done nothing. He remembers thinking monster and then, thankadite gonna be okay. He remembers hours later promising himself that he'd get stronger so Izukin never had to do that for him again, looking away from cold, fox eyes and sinking into his friend's lap and turning away so he didn't have to see anything anymore. He remembers all three of them, bundled up in all-might onesies and big soft blankets on the couch at Izukin's place with hot chocolate, Izukin's Kan and Kaken's mom and dad in the kitchen, voices quiet over the TV sounding as scared and tired as he felt. He remembers promising to get stronger and two voices joining him, resolutely. He remembers feeling like nothing would ever be the same again, but that it was okay because these two would never, ever leave. He wasn't alone. He didn't have to be alone. Izukin holds the cup up for him to drink again and Toshi smiles at him, grins like the world is theirs. Izukin and Kaken smile back, rough and proud and determined. Izukin's Kan calls them for dinner and he groans. I don't know if I can stand. He doesn't care that he's whining. He deserves whining. Kaken grunts. Don't be stupid. And jams his shoulder into his armpit and heaves him up. Izukin is chattering away at a mile a minute and steadies him with one hand as Kaken lets go slowly, one hand on his back, hovering. Everything hurts. But it's a good hurt. He can smell ramen broth and fried meat and Izukin is bouncing as he leads them out the door. The table is set. He sees his place marked with a dark green cup with bright white lilies that's his, already out and filled with juice, and he wonders if he's ever felt more at home. More safe. He wonders if things have ever felt this okay. Inko Midoriya's boy is 10 and she knows there's something different about him. She's a lot of things but not one of them is unobservant. She's known for a long time. It's not quirkless different, or smart different, or different because he's too full of spirit to contain the passion inside him. That's all true of course, but that's not what she means. She notices things. Like kitchen knives breaking and being thrown away too often. She knows her Izukin can cook, because they do it together. He even makes her dinner some nights, nothing fancy but it's still so thoughtful and kind. Sometimes she has to stay at the office late and Mitsuko picks the boys up and when she gets home Izukin is waiting at the table with 2 plates of food halfway to cold and big, grateful eyes and he looks so happy to see her it almost breaks her heart. She sees the notebooks of hero notes that are far too keen for a boy his age. They include ruthlessly practical analysis and counters that she knows might make some pros flinch, messy medical diagrams that look like anything but guesses. He popped a dislocated shoulder back in with only a grimace, and she'd only caught it because she'd gone looking for him at the park. He'd deflected so well she forgot about it until later that evening when he was already in bed. He leads the other kids at the park better than most managers she's worked with, through games that push them. The training they do, the 3 of them, seems almost military at times. And he has nightmares. She's seen him when she passes by at night, back pressed to the wall and hand clutched to his shirt and eyes unseeing and chest heaving. He's never screamed and he's never come to her after like she knows others boys do, like she with her own cousin when she was his age. She doesn't know what it means, but she knows that it means something. Her boy is different. And she's worried, of course she is, but her boy is happy. Her Izukin is so happy. He wants to be a hero so bad, and with how much work he puts in she just knows he can do it. Even if teachers call her and suggest, politely, that she steer him on a different course. Even if Mitsuko asks her if she's really okay with her boy being delusional like that, Inko gives her the what's what and even though the other woman apologizes they both know she still means it. Her boy has a strong heart and he hasn't let anyone take that from him. Neither of them talk about it, the ways that he's different from other children. They don't have to. And so long as it doesn't hurt her boy, she won't bring it up. She just hopes that he knows he can tell her anything, that he can talk to her if something comes up that he can't deal with. She had taken him to a therapist for a few months after the villain incident in the park. The nice young woman told her after a few months that he was a remarkably well-adjusted child, sounding baffled bordering on concerned. And she hopes he knows that his Kuchon has a strong heart and a strong will too. And that if anything ever touches a hair on his or his little friends' heads, she will burn them down to the roots and salt the earth. Because he's her boy. And she's always going to be worried about him. Her boy's okay for now. But she's fought hero agencies in court for well over a decade now, and she knows exactly how to fight back if she needs to. How to fight for her boy when she'll need to, someday. She likes to think her son gets his quick mind from her. She is and isn't right. Izuku Midoriya is 11 and his park squad, which has grown and shrunk over the years as kids join and move on but still has at least a dozen of that first group, has come up with a new game all on their own. They've been dancing around something for weeks, all cryptic and cool. They all work together to set it up too, hiding things throughout the neighborhood for a huge scavenger hunt. Red-dusted, determined, anxious faces are all clustered around, eyes wide and waiting for him to say something. Because up until now, he's done all the planning, made all the games. He's been the leader, unquestionably. He's so proud. Someone once told Naruto that he had a habit of collecting strays. That someone was Sasuke, whose ass he proceeded to beat for daring to put himself down like that, because he was a person too and just as good as anyone else, goddammit. Hours later, completely unknown to him, Sasuke collected an almost obscene amount of money in the Jounin pool from people who really shouldn't have been stupid enough to bet against Naruto being a reactive, overprotective little shit who took everything personally. It was their own fault really. Naruto disagreed because calling someone a stray is awful, and so is saying that he collected people. Izuku is still of that opinion. He also agrees that he tends to inspire a lot of loyalty from a lot of people very quickly. Mostly because he tends to be that loyal right back, very quickly. And he never lets that loyalty go and will 100% burn the world to stumps and embers before breaking that trust. People used to say his hope and his kindness had been naivete. They were his strongest weapons. His world had so little kindness in it, that every scrap of it matters so much. Lives in their world were cheap, but kindness was priceless. His hope had changed the world. Saved the world, more than anyone had since Hashirama. He'd learned from Haku, and from Zabuza, and from Inari, and it wasn't a lesson he ever forgot. He doesn't have his old team anymore. But he has a new one. A new 3-man squad and a bigger team too, it looked like. They've got 5 hours to play. He wonders if Kakashi felt like this during their second team test. Izuku pumps a fist in the air and smiles like the sun because he's ecstatic and proud and full of love and loyalty and heart and tells them to start explaining, damn it, before he runs out without the rules because that sounds so plus ultra. The group slums as one, relief and pride and joy shining in them. The leader of this ambush, short hair swinging as she bounces forward with a shark's grin, and starts talking. Honestly, it sounds amazing. Toshi, next to him, looks slyly excited. Kaken looks like he wants to blow something up extra bad, in the good way. It's gonna be a great fucking day. Izuku Midoriya is 12 and he still hasn't gotten his goddamn chakra to work. He's tried everything. Kurama has tried everything. And yeah, sure, neither one of them are intellectual powerhouses or anything, but it's been years. You would think they'd have figured something out. Though, at this point, if he tried to channel chakra for the first time in a body this old, it would probably hurt. A lot. Because there's a reason they start kids manipulating theirs so young, when the pathways are still elastic and can be trained to accept growth and progress. He's not really sure he wants to know what it would feel like to create brand new chakra pathways. Not that that would stop him. He'd just hesitate, a bit, probably. And you're sure you don't want to try the 8 gates? Kurama confirms, studying their long claws as if there might be something under them. Because empty mind spaces definitely have dirt. I'm nuts, Izuku shrugs. His pants are soaked with fake water that doesn't really feel wet. But I'm not Lee and Guy nuts. This world can't heal anything like that. I'd be stuck doing nothing for the rest of my life. I also don't have any clue how. Kurama shrugs, because they definitely don't know either, even though they'd never admit it. I'm trying with taijutsu, but mine wasn't that good or anything. It's true. He mostly just threw chakra into his body and jumped around a lot. Or, okay, he'd gotten better. But he still wasn't a master of finesse. He was experienced more than well taught. It worked then, when he'd had chakra to overpower his movement with. It won't work now. And you're still set on heroics. Kurama looks about as resigned as they do disdainful. Izuku nods though. I can do it. Kurama fixes him with a long yellow stare. That's not at all the problem. Izuku is well aware that the problem is he's too much of a hero already, and that this time he doesn't have any of his badass ninjutsu or record-breaking chakra levels to back it up. If he dies, Kurama dies. Probably. Neither one of them are really still sure on that. Even now, when he might have done it once already, they're not sure. But it is a reasonable enough bet. I'll be careful, Izuku concedes, even though he absolutely won't. You had better be. Kurama growls. The both of them are well aware that his impulse control and self-preservation instinct have in no way improved over the course of this lifetime. They're also both ignoring this. And I'll have a team. Izuku insists, arms waving in the air like it's a very important point. And it is, kind of, better than not having a team. Kurama seems to begrudgingly agree. They like Toshi and Kaken better than Sasuke, and Jiraiya, and even Kakashi sometimes. They had warmed to Sakura a little over time, but giant chakra rage beasts are apparently not very good at forgiveness. Kakashi hadn't been a very good sensei, Sasuke had almost killed them, and Jiraiya was annoying and had kept quite a bit from them. A great team. We're going to be amazing. The best heroes ever. Kurama is not impressed. But they doesn't insinuate they don't believe him. Because if anyone knows the lengths Izuku's stubbornness can pull him, it's Kurama. Plus, if we all get into UA together, we'll have the best teachers in the whole country. Famous heroes. He's thrilled at the prospect. So are Kaken and Toshi. Good at fighting doesn't mean good at teaching. Kurama huffs out, breath hot enough to singe his skin. And Izuku concedes that point. Kakashi was a great fighter. He was a shit sensei though. And Jiraiya tried his best. But that was still kind of a disaster. If you find anyone as loud or perverted as the Toad, I will find a way to escape and tear you to pieces for them to watch. Izuku isn't entirely sure that's hyperbole. Katsuki Bakugo is 13, and he's fucking exhausted. He loves working out. Loves it. The burn of his muscles, feeling yourself getting stronger inch by inch, mock matches where he gets to beat the shit out of his friends while they beat the shit out of him. It's great. Maybe he's been pushing it a bit, though. Just a bit. Because right now, he's not sure he can move. At all. Or, maybe he can, maybe he's physically able, but he's not sure he can make himself. Kaken? Deku sounds concerned, hovering over him. He cracks one eye open. Why are you on the floor? That's a good fucking question. Why is he on the floor? Because the floor is cold, which is nice, and he barely made it up the stairs to Deku's shitty apartment that absolutely should not be on the 3rd floor. Like hell he can make it out of the entryway. Fuck you, he says instead. He overworked himself. Toshi injects, dryly, from the couch. Bastard didn't even help him over. Deku gets that look on his face, all determined and completely out of place for the situation. Like they're going into fucking battle or something. And without asking, he gets a face full of green hair as he's hauled up and pulled forward and slumped back into the couch. He groans, but it's nicer than the floor. You're going to have to rest a few days. Deku scolds, which sounds not at all like scolding, far too cheerful, but still feels like it. If you hadn't pushed so far, we could have gone for a super fun run tomorrow. Maybe Toshi and I will do it without you. He's considering it as he shucks Katsuki's shoes off, which feels like removing bricks from his limbs. Fuck, that's nice. Toshi snickers. Fuck him. Deku starts to move his legs up and down, bending them a bit at the knee. Fuck, that feels nice. Hurts too, but it feels great. And it should help get some of that whatever acid worked out of his limbs, because it's going to hurt enough in a couple hours without that shit. He growls, a little. Lucky for him, Deku and Toshi can translate. Deku beams up at him. You know you really shouldn't forget to stretch. Toshi clicks through a page on some hero site or another on his phone, not looking up. Fuck off. He groans, voice breaking a little at the end when Deku stretches his leg out all the way and then up towards his chest. Except it definitely doesn't. Because that would be lame. I told you 10 laps on top of everything was gonna put you in the hospital. Toshi sighs and sets his phone down, switching on the TV absently and taking one of Katsuki's hands. He massages the joints slowly, eyes fixed on the screen and resolutely pretending he isn't helping. Does this look like a hospital, asshole? His voice is a little raspy. He could use some water, shit. It looks like bedrest for a few days, young man. Damn, he hadn't heard Inko come in. Situational awareness, he reminds himself dully. Kachan. Deku jumps up to greet her, no doubt wrapping himself up in a hug. Deku's Kachan had the best hugs. He drops Katsuki's leg and his heel impacts the hardwood floor. He doesn't even really feel it, but it still hurts enough that he grunts. I'll make something with a lot of protein for dinner. I better see you boys eating your fill if you're going to exhaust yourselves like this. Inko ruffles his hair before she bustles off to the kitchen. Izuku's Kachan is a blessing. She worries a lot, but she might be the best cook he knows. Makes up for it. Usually. Toshi pins him with a deadpan look and sighs. I'll call your parents. You obviously aren't moving tonight. Katsuki curls the hand Toshi's holding, middle finger up. Toshi laughs lightly, ringtone echoing muffled in the air. Bakugu-san. Toshi sounds all polite and proper and emotive. Fake bitch. Izuku and I were wondering if Katsuki could stay the night? We spent too long at the park and we were supposed to study for a biology test today, but we could do it tonight if he can stay. He sounds all contrite and cheerful. The biology test is next week, anyway. Though he's really not sure how Toshi knows that, going to a whole other school. Yeah, we just got a little carried away. He has an expression on his face like he's acting in a damn play. Thank you, Bakugu-san. And please tell Katsuki's Ka-san that he's okay, she always seems so worried about him. Toshi's concerned voice should win him a fucking award. Thank you for saying so, I try to be. All fake bashful, Katsuki could almost see the blush on his cheeks. We'll take care of him. Have a good night. Toshi hangs up and drops the phone, melting back into the usual bland expression and slumps his shoulders against the back of the couch. He only looks a little exhausted by it, which is an improvement. Socially, he's the most competent of them. Well, most measured. Doesn't mean it's easy. You're like Magic Toshi. Deku is smiling like he's witnessed a miracle. Toshi sounds awkward now, genuinely. It's not that hard. Adults always like you best. Deku nods at him like this is sacred wisdom. You're so good at talking to people. He'd be pouting, but he's so obviously proud. This is why it's so hard to be mad at Deku. That and the nerd does shit like help him stretch out limbs he's nearly too tired to move at all. Which he started doing again. Fucking lifesaver. How do you feel about that run tomorrow, Toshi? Deku asks with a cheeky fox's smile. Sounds great. Doesn't mean he doesn't want to punch them both. Right in their smug little faces. Hitoshi Shinso is 13 and he's been thinking. For a while. He knows Izuku's noticed, but he also knows he won't ask. Well, won't ask unless it becomes a problem. He's not sure about Kaken, but then that's not exactly strange. As good as he is at reading the other boy, he still misses a lot. Contrary to popular opinion, Kaken has a fantastic poker face when it comes down to it. You're bleeding. Kaken isn't even looking at him, bent over what might be the third revision of his history essay. He'd been chewing in the pad of his thumb anxiously and he hadn't been paying attention and now he's bleeding. Hitoshi huffs and presses it against his pants, black thankfully. It's not much, it'll stop soon. Toshi? Izuku looks worried as he almost trips through the open door, arms full of snacks and 3 iced drinks courtesy of his amazing Kung. You have some blood? He gestures with a shoulder to his face, arms very full. He wipes it away with his other hand, and watches as Izuku folds and collapses down to the rough circle of papers on the floor, somehow managing not to spill on himself or drop anything. He's thinking too hard. Impossible to fucking focus when you're brooding like that. Kaken is actively scribbling on his essay, and Toshi doesn't believe him for a second. Good to know he cares. So? Izuku prompts, passing out drinks over and around the papers. He presses Kaken's to his head until the blonde looks up, sour but only the normal amount. I've been thinking, he ignores Kaken's muttered snark with the grace of years of friendship, that if we're gonna be heroes and two of us don't have combat quirks, that we needs practice, experience. Izuku is watching him, eyes intense in the way that washes over him sometimes, deadly and sharp and pinning him down like the boy could see through to his soul. Vigilantism. It isn't a question. Hitoshi isn't surprised he had picked up so fast. Izuku sees the heart of things clearer than anyone he's ever met. Kaken leans back, steadying his weight with one hand and watching him with an almost pinched expression. You want us to be vigilantes? Yeah, I do. We're going to be up against the best, even just to get into UA. We can train all we want but he bites his lip, careful not to draw blood again. We need experience, we have to know what we're even doing. And if we get caught, if we ruin any chance of ever being heroes? Kaken's teeth grind together. He isn't truly angry yet, but he's certainly fuming. What makes you think we have any right to go out there? What makes you think we'll do anything but get beat to shit? We won't get caught, we'll be careful, not use our quirks if we have to. We've been training for this. He's thought of that and tried to let it erase this all, but it couldn't, not when he's goddamn terrified all this work is going to be for nothing just because he can't measure up to some kid with a flashy combat quirk. We won't get fucking listen to yourself, huh? Kaken's breathing slow and heavy, controlling his reaction. Why the fuck can't we just leave it to the heroes? Because the heroes don't always get there in time. It's quiet. But he means it. And we will. Kaken looks away. But he isn't on the edge of yelling anymore. Toshi knows it might be unfair to bring that up. There's silence. Hitoshi looks down at his lap. He needs to know. To know if he can do this. But he can't do it without them. Without his team. He won't. Masks? Izuku breaks the tension like glass. We can wear masks and we can be careful and we'll go somewhere else. But close enough that we can get home if one of us gets hurt? Masks? Kaken snorts, shaking his head. Izuku nods, decisively. Yeah, and big jackets or something. Except he doesn't sound like it's or something, he sounds like he has a plan. You want to go beat up muggers in the middle of the goddamn night? Kaken double-checks, exasperatedly. Izuku nods. Kaken shakes his head like he's trying to dislodge the stupidity and pins them each with a heated glare. Then he slumps and his head flops backwards. Fine. Fucking fine. But if this blows up, I'm blaming your shitty asses. When he drags himself up, he's half smiling and his fists are clenched in something Hitoshi knows is anticipation. When do we fucking start? Izuku smiles like the sun. They can do this, they have to. Izuku knows how to hide in plain sight. The mechanics of it haven't changed that much between worlds. Disguise the shapes of the frame, stick to the shadows, act like you belong. He hasn't ever put much effort into stealth exercises before, and he wonders if he should start. Maybe next time at the park, they can play some kind of thief game? Something sneaky. They aren't shinobi, he doesn't think they'll need to be particularly stealthy. Being a vigilante isn't exactly like being a shinobi, not the kind he'd been, but it's the closest he's been in a long time and it's tugging on things. Old instincts, old wounds, old triumphs. They had done a week of stealth exercises, just the three of them, before he was comfortable moving on to patrolling, to the actual vigilante work. Kaken and Toshi had spent most of it trading looks. The kind they tend to when he does something just a bit outside of reasonable suspension of disbelief. Which, okay, he definitely understands because he's known them both most of this life and he'd never been sneaky like this before. Maybe a bit in Hero Tag or Capture the Flag, but not like this. He's still getting used to the movements too, even if he knows them by heart. Knowing how and where to put your foot down didn't mean it was habit, like it used to be, like it always used to be, because he'd needed to never, ever be seen after dark or in the market. And yeah, they aren't wearing masks. They have hoods and hats to hide their hair, and he'd maybe bought a couple boxes of colored contacts. But masks are just on this side of too conspicuous, really. He's spent hours online, combing through hero records and reports to make sure they aren't going to be stepping on anyone's turf. Not any area that's seen too regularly. The last thing he wants is for them to be caught by a hero, a professional. There are several active heroes in the area, and more that don't have a set of neighborhoods to patrol and the schedule looked pretty random at first. But he hasn't been a shinobi for nothing. This area is probably gonna be good for tonight, for the week really, but they're responsibly limiting themselves to once-a-week patrols. Fridays so they could sleep in. Kaken insisted. After looking into all that, well, he's only a little embarrassed to say he has a schedule of hero activity, and projected hero activity, and villain activity, and organized. It's color-coded. They just have to operate in the gaps. What little information he could get on organized crime activity down and hot spots for legitimate villain attacks are noted more loosely, great swaths highlighted in red. He is staying as far away from that as he is physically able. He's an idiot, but he's not stupid. And he's looked into laws too. Technically, if they didn't get involved until an incident had started, and didn't use their quirks, nothing they would do would be illegal. And yeah, okay, quirk use in self-defense is totally legal too, but according to Kachan that's really hard to prove. They should be in the clear, but only if things don't escalate and go to hell. Which he isn't counting on. This is something he's absolutely treating like a C rank mission, and his C ranks had never ever gone to plan. He has several scary-looking knives he can plant or use based on the situation, just in case. The biggest danger might be Kachan figuring out they're sneaking out, honestly. This is their second time doing this. Nerves are still high. Kaken jumps at any kind of sound from the alleys. They're just off a fairly busy area, far enough away that it won't be part of any hero patrols but close enough that not everyone will be in at this hour. Last time, they'd taken down a mugger and a purse snatcher and spent several hours doing jack-all. Not exactly as exciting as he feels like Toshi and Kaken had been expecting. But it's the practice they wanted. To be fair though, Izuku's looked at crime statistics, and he's keeping them where he thinks they can handle. Mentally. Physically, he's certain Hei could handle some small-scale villainy. But Toshi still shies away from dark corners and Kaken still hesitates to make serious blows. He's not sure who he himself will be when it comes down to it, if he'll have to fight against instincts to put the threat down for good or if he'll get caught up in flashbacks and memories and slip, hesitate, put them all in danger. They're strolling casually through the streets. There are cameras around, and even though Toshi is pretty great at identifying blind spots and slipping around them, they still need to be careful not to look too suspicious. It's been an hour and a bit since they got here and nothing much has happened. He is getting a little bored. Toshi's half-lidded eyes don't exactly scream engagement either. There's a rustle in an alley, a half-muffled shout, and they're moving. Of course it's now that they're starting to drift that something happens. Near the other end, there are two figures he can see silhouetted roughly, shadows in the dark far enough apart to be identified as separate and close enough together that he can't quite tell what's going on. Which is a bit of a problem. Because, well, they nearly crashed one quickly escalating instance of public sex already. This doesn't sound like that, exactly, but then it's quiet enough that he can't really tell and he doesn't want to interrupt anyone's fun. He has no idea why sex in a dirty alley would be preferable to sex anywhere clean or private, but he's a shinobi and he grew up just adjacent to the red light district too. It's not really scandalous to him. Toshi and Kaken haven't been exposed like that though, and he doesn't know enough about child development to say with any confidence if it might be detrimental for them to see. Kaken and Toshi are looking to him though. He breathes out through his nose slowly. Kaken, swing around the other end and wait for a signal. We'll come get you if it's nothing, or, if it's nothing we need to worry about. Izuku nods to Kaken, who slips down next alley from their target almost like a ghost. Close enough to a silent shadow that he spends a couple seconds swelling with pride before he turns and motions Toshi to follow. None of them are perfectly shinobi silent yet, but they make up for it by being shorter than most people pay attention to and knowing how and when to move. Mostly. He knows how, and Toshi is a confident follower, and that's all they need right now. There are two bulky figures at the end of the alley, and they're growling at someone he can't see well. He takes a risk and gets close enough to hear them clearly. You really think you can steal from us and get away with it? Number 1 snaps, steam rising from him in a way that indicates quirk use. Number 2 shoves the figure in the shadows. You gonna say something, punk? If you know what's good for you, you'll give those wallets back right now. We worked hard for those. 1 spits. Give them back before we make you regret crossing us more than we're gonna already. And Izuku hesitates. Because he's not sure he wants to get in the middle of a criminal turf war or anything. There are 3 of them, and if he gets involved the third might start throwing punches, and he's not sure they can take all 3 at once. He's not sure they can either. And then, well, he hears something that makes his blood boil. Say something, stupid fucking bitch dash. He whites out, a bit, blood rushing like static in his ears, and he snarls, low and quiet and animalistic. Not on his fucking watch. It's enough for 2 to look over, silhouette scanning the alley. Izuku freezes, one arm moving smooth and slow into his jacket pocket to touch cool metal, waits until the man takes a step deeper into the alley. Coils. Nods so Toshi knows to follow, hopefully. There are some things about the differences between worlds that he hates. This specific prejudice hadn't existed in his world. Physicality mattered very little in the face of blood and steel. He isn't about to tolerate it now. He springs, teeth bared silently, and breaks the man's fucking jaw with brass knuckles. One of his park squad had made them on commission, delightfully. He's still 13, it's not like he could use adult ones. Toshi isn't even half a beat behind him, sweeping the man's legs out. One is a second too late, shouting and charging, the air melting around him like heat waves. Kaken is behind him, landing a solid kick to the center of his back and knocking him to the ground, dropping from a fire exit almost nimbly. Toshi is on one a second later, a solid weight on the man's back as he thrashes, head pinned back, arm around his throat squeezing. It's not smooth, but it isn't clumsy either, and Izuku is proud, so proud. 2 groans next to him, arms moving like he's going to push himself up, and Izuku snaps a kick to his head. The man slumps, only the shallow movement of his back up and down indicating life. He's not particularly sorry. He steps forward, crushing one's wrist under his foot because maybe he's a bit pissed. Toshi has it covered though, and Kaken is off to the side, stiff-backed and watchful as one weakens and slumps, palms forward in case the man can reaches for a weapon and he needs to intervene. Izuku doubts it. He's sure they're not all bark and no bite, but he's also pretty confident they're not going to be a problem now. Benefit of the element of surprise and superior numbers. The third figure is still frozen in the shadows, but Izuku can see better now. He can see the carefully coiled posture and the balled fists. He needs to make sure they don't have a third combatant to deal with. Also, he hopes she's okay. Ma'am? He starts, half grinning in a way he knows makes him look about as harmless as a teenager with a pair of brass knuckles can be. Are you okay? We have a first aid kit if you need anything. He swings his backpack forwards to his chest, shrugging off one strap. He pretends he doesn't see the figure shift warily. He tosses a coiled bundle of rope to Kaken over his shoulder, snorting cheerfully when he boy starts to grumble. Not your fucking errand, boy. He snaps, without much heat, but Izuku can hear fabric rustling and in bodies moving, so, you know he's sure it's fine. He holds out a candy bar to the woman. Here. A black-gloved hand reaches out, tentatively, and takes it. It's full size, and one of the good chocolate bars, not the mealy kind. So, he hopes it's appreciated. What's your name? I'd tell you mine, but he laughs, one hand coming up to rub at the back of his neck over the fabric of the hoodie. You know, I'm not really supposed to be out here. There's a short period of silence, and then she snorts. Masaki. There's no last name, but he's not surprised really. Nice to meet you, Masaki. He chirps brightly. Now, see, we need to call the cops, so you should probably get out of here. Masaki takes a step forwards, peeling away from the wall. She's got broad shoulders, taller than him by maybe half a foot. Red-brown hair is in the awkward stage of growing out where it just sort of looks shaggy around her ears and chin. Pleasant peach lipstick has been smudged, side of her lips split like it had caught a fist. She's older than them by maybe 5, 6 years. And she looks, well, mystified. And ready to throw down, if need be. It's not a look he's unfamiliar with. It is in fact a look he's inspired in almost everyone he's ever met. Though, if you wouldn't mind Mississippi. He starts to bounce a little. Helps him think, believe it. They said something about wallets? You can keep the cash, nothing wrong with stealing from a thief, I don't think. But if you could leave them here, the wallets and IDs, I'm sure it would help put them away for a while. He's doing this for practice, and they're already stolen wallets. He's had to steal to get through the week too, so he can't really judge her. Masaki watches him like a hawk, gaze keen and sharp and searching. He grins at her a little wider. He's adorable, he knows he's adorable, and he knows it's disarming. She chuckles and shakes her head, one hand jamming into the pocket of a brown canvas jacket and pulling out a couple wallets. She ruffles through them with the ease of practice, pulling cash out with a couple fingers and flicking them past him. Izuku takes a couple steps back, turning to the side to see 1 and 2 tied up. 1 is starting to regain consciousness. Kaken takes care of that pretty quick. Toshi has the shitty little phone they'd bought just to call the cops, because shinobi paranoia is a bitch, and up to his ear. Masaki drops 5 wallets onto their laps and starts digging in their coat pockets for more after a moment of hesitation. Seems like a lot to him, but then Konoha had never been as densely populated as the cities here. None of them make a move to stop her. They've got a few more between them. Busy night being scum, apparently. He might be a bit biased though, since he doesn't care that Masaki probably didn't just steal from those two. Masaki finishes quickly, presses a few bills in his hand with a quick thank you, and is gone before he can respond. He doesn't really need the money, but he guesses she needs to give it to him. Personal morals are messy, he's learned not to fuss about them too much. He says instead. 2 moves, groaning a little. Toshi absently plants a foot against one of the man's hands and leans some weight into it. The man, wisely, shuts up. They're tied to a fire escape ladder very thoroughly, cute little blindfolds even. Kaken is stowing 3 confiscated knives and a box cutter in his backpack with a frown. Izuku double-checks for weapons, quickly, and then they're off because staying for the police isn't really the plan. Ideally, no one at all would know they're doing this. So, leaving quickly is in their best interest. Toshi nudges him with one shoulder awkwardly as they round the corner at the far end of the street. Hey, his eyes dip, face tight. Can I have that? He nods to the handful of bills in Izuku's hand, shoulders taut and just this side of too casual. Izuku hands it over without a thought. He'd have just given it to some old lady on the street. If Toshi needs it, it's better he has it. The boy tosses him a grateful smile. He worries about Toshi, sometimes, but he trusts his friend to tell them if anything serious ever happens. He hopes he's right. He's good at hoping. Izuku is 14 and class is super boring. Okay, no it's not. Usually he loves class. Because here, the teacher doesn't pick on him or mark his essays up worse than a first-time mission report. He even has friends to study with, too. Only a couple, but it's more than enough. He gets along okay with most of the class but feels that weird distance that he used to with civilians. He has Kaken and Toshi, and for finals the whole park squad gets together to study. Toshi goes to another school, he still won't tell them which one, but Kaken is in his class. People are kinda scared of Kaken usually, because he's super intense and grumpy and scowly. He's toned it back with the yelling a bit, in the past couple years. But that more often just means he's usually silent and broody instead of loud and moody. It's hilarious. It reminds his a little of Sasuke at times, except not really. He's stopped seeing ghosts at every turn. He still misses them so much it chokes him sometimes. And he still loves them. And that won't change. But the memories don't haunt him, don't cling like a film or a fog where they don't belong. He hopes that's a good thing. Today, though, class is absolutely super boring because there's a new ramen place just 2 blocks over and it's opening day. He's 3 weeks ahead, anyway. Sakura would be proud of him, except it turns out history is pretty easy when it's not 60% classified and 20% propaganda. Math is kinda like sealing a bit to the left. English is easy after learning the language of seals mostly on his own while Ero-sensei was off being drunk or pervy or a spy. Lit is a little tough, but nothing he can't deal with. Books and poems haven't ever been his best subject really. Science is hard but he's stubborn and pushing through. He'd passed the Ninja Academy barely literate after all. This is a piece of cake. Izuku slips out early, citing an upset stomach, which probably only works because he has a pair of killer puppy dog eyes. And he's a good student, mostly. The ramen is good. Maybe great. Not at Shiraku's, but then nothing is. Still, they don't have significant trade shortages here, so there are lots more ingredients. Also, getting as much meat as he wants for pretty cheap is awesome. He heads back to school after he finishes up to pick Kakin up. School's already out but waits at the gate for half an hour before realizing it's a park day. He smacks himself in the head and starts off towards the park. It's not busy, so he should make pretty good time. And then, well, then things get weird. Weird like a sewage monster weird. Weird like flashbacks of something pulling and tugging and tearing inside of him, and holy shit, he can usually hold his own a lot better than this. He shouldn't have been taken by surprise, he shouldn't. He's struggling, burning for breath. His hands shake and Kurama's roars cloud out rational thought. Terror settles in his bones in light lightning. Black static creeps at the edges of his vision and he fights and then he wakes up. And holy shit. All Might is like touching his face. The hero isn't in his costume, but he's laughing and has soda bottles filled with villain, and Kakin is going to be so jealous. If he can get proof. He doesn't even have to ask for an autograph. His hero training and planning notebook has 2 whole pages of signature and he can copy the notes over, believe it, because his old world didn't have many celebrities that weren't in bingo books and trying to kill him, and how cool is that hair? The idea of someone genuinely trying to protect the world, to be its shield, always gets his will of fire burning. He has questions to ask. Several important ones. And All Might is leaving. Can't have that. He dives and grabs on because that's never failed him before, except now All Might probably thinks he's a weird superfan and okay. Maybe a little bit. But that's not the driving factor here, believe it. He has a question he needs to ask. All Might screams at him and yeah, warranted. I don't have a quirk, he says, standing tall on some rooftop All Might had landed on, the amazing feeling of jumping like a shinobi again breathless in his chest, even if it was by proxy. Kinda. But I'm going to be a hero anyway, believe it. I was just wondering if you had any advice. Anything you wished you'd trained in harder. Anything, I don't know, anything the dash. And then All Might starts curling in pain and steaming and choking back screams in a way that's viscerally familiar. Something's wrong. Something's very wrong. The smoke clears. There's a very angular, very blonde corpse standing in front on him. In All Might's clothes. Like he just deflated. Izuku blinks. Ah, he says. He chokes back a laugh by very pointedly not thinking the words small might and just kinda. Sirs. His brain is whirring. He'd been okay smart before being reborn here, good enough with the practicals to make up for his flimsy theoretical base. He was clever, adaptable, not like the 2 geniuses on Team 7, or 3, but Kakashi didn't count here, neither Yamato nor Sai had been gifted like that, which had endeared them to him enormously at the beginning, but canny enough not to fall behind. Maybe it was just from overworking his brain so much so early in this body's life, but now he kinda understands why Shikamaru thought everything was slow and boring. He clicks through possibilities as All Might says something about a pool and guys sucking up fat to look big as an explanation. Workplace injury? Quirk side effect? Short-term or longer-term use? And how did that affect what All Might's quirk actually is? He's processing. He needs a sect. And he's gotta make sure. So, you're for real All Might, the mountain of muscles with the big fearless smile? He's pretty sure All Might chokes on the back of his neck, and he starts coughing roughly in response. Then the hero sinks down, back on the railing and legs almost sprawling. There's plenty of fear behind that smile. He starts. And Izuku nods, because he's not that naive. But All Might is talking and it's rude to interrupt. He's been told so many times. The man lifts up his shirt and Izuku's brake hitches because he knows how much something like that can hurt firsthand. Because even with his super healing it had taken months for the scar tissue on his chest and the fried nerves to stop feeling like they were burning. He resists the urge to press his hand to a mark that isn't there any longer, that was never there at all. All Might's torso is red and bruised and the healing looks so strained, and this man is a professional and of course he can't just take a day off. My respiratory system was basically destroyed. I lost my whole stomach. All the surgeries have pretty much worn me out. It can't be fixed. Right now I can only do hero work for about 3 hours a day. Quietly, Izuku wonders how much he's pushing himself just for that. Rest of the time, this is what I look like. Pieces snap into place. 5 years ago, he trails off. He won't ask. He's invaded enough privacy today, even if that hadn't been the goal. Sometimes he really does wonder if he does have a quirk, and if it's the only truly preternatural skill he had in his old world, the ability to pull life stories and critical issues from opponents out of thin air. Therapy no Jutsu, his team and the rest of the Konoha 12 joked. Therapy no Jutsu, Izuku repeats sardonically in his head. All Might continues anyway, because that's the fucking day this is. For the both of them, it feels like most of the world hasn't even heard of this fight. Did everything I could to keep it under wraps? He pauses for a beat, lifting his eyes from the concrete panels of the roof to Izuku. I'm supposed to be the guy who's always smiling, right? I'm the symbol of peace. And fuck, Izuku gets it. He can't say it, but he gets it. The linchpin. People everywhere have to think that I'm never afraid. The man drops the hem of his now drastically oversized shirt and lays his hands in his lap, staring down at his own bony, crooked fingers. But honestly, I smile to hide the fear inside. It's just a brave face I put on when the pressure is high. And Izuku remembers a little blonde his baring his fangs to the world and a commander with a fox grin and a voice that didn't waver, sending shinobi to die by the dozens. Because they didn't have hundreds anymore. A war he'd rather die than fight, but fought anyway because he couldn't ask anyone else to die for him when he was strong, when he could make a difference, and so many of them were only holding on because no one else had given up yet. He was the one who had unified them. He thinks this world would call him a hero if they heard the story. He thinks they would call him a villain if they knew the truth of shinobi warfare. This job isn't easy. All Might sounds defeated. Pro heroes are always having to risk their lives. Some villains just can't be beaten without powers. So can you be a hero? Not without a quirk. Sounds like he's telling it to himself. That wasn't Izuku's question. But it feels like now isn't the time to correct him. Izuku nods instead, and walks over, and pulls a metal water bottle from the side of his backpack, and he sits down next to All Might. He clearly telegraphs his movement, but All Might doesn't move as he presses the bottle gently against the man's side, and memories of laying his cold kunai against the rippling, burning scars that used to cover his own chest echo through his body. He feels the hero flinch in surprise and then almost melt. It's through the cloth of his shirt, so the cold won't be so sharp. Izuku holds the bottle by the cap, so that the other sides will still be cool in a minute. He can feel the heat on his fingers, faintly, from where they are. Not even touching the skin. Helps, huh? He says, the weight of All Might's gaze pressing down on him. It had helped him at least, not that he can say that. The old scar had still hurt and the cold of his kunai had still been biting, but it had tingled more than burned. Bad in a way that he could deal with. This is probably too invasive, but that's never stopped him before. No one hero can fight everyone. A bad environment or a bad matchup can mean the end of a career, if the hero is lucky. He remembers. He remembers Gaara and Lee. He remembers Haiden and Asuma and too many more battles that didn't end with both parties still breathing. But that's the point, isn't it? We keep fighting anyway. And why heroes and agencies team up when things get real big or real bad. You should have stopped fighting a long time ago. But you can't, can you? Izuku grins up at him, eyes almost shut, smiling at his sunniest. I can't either. All Might is staring at him. All Might's jaw is hanging open like a hinge, pretty literally, since he can actually see the bone and the connective bits and stuff under the skin. He doesn't flinch away from it. He turns the bottle a bit, so the metal against the hero's side will stay cool. I don't want to assume, Izuku says, voice almost soft in a way he'd never learned to be before. But you were fighting alone, weren't you? He takes a breath. He remembers that Sasuke left them because he didn't think they were strong enough to support him. He remembers that Sasuke was wrong. A team that trusts each other can take on enemies impossible for any individual. He looks at All Might like he looked at Sasuke when he'd punched him in the face after one of their fights and told him he had a pretty cool sword, for a bastard. Told him to come home. Plenty of heroes don't have combat-enhancing quirks. I have a team. I can make a bigger one. And I'll prove I won't hold anyone back. Believe it? All Might looks at him like he's looking for something, like he's deciding something, mouth slowly closing as Izuku shifts the bottle again to move it to the cooler side. Scars and bruises like that hurt like a bitch. And if you irritate them, they get hot and itchy, and he's glad he doesn't have to deal with that anymore. His chest itches with the memory of it anyway. There's an explosion, 3 blocks down and 2 over, and Izuku realizes 3 things in quick succession. The soda bottles are gone. He can hear Kaken screaming. And he is going to kill someone. He'll wonder later if All Might noticed any of those, but he's halfway off the roof with his water bottle in hand, parkouring down the fire escape. He hits the ground running. That's his Kaken and that stupid, disgusting sludge face. The villain won't fucking touch anything of his ever again. He gets there minutes, painful minutes later. The situation. Kaken is in the grasp of the villain, blowing shit up and making hell but barely holding back the sludge from all but devouring him. Toshi is shouting at them, trying to give his quirk something to latch on to, but the bastard isn't paying him any mind. And there's a crowd of onlookers doing absolutely fuck all. He's furious at all of it, but he shoves it down and focuses. Toshi! He shouts, crash the party. Toshi hears him. Toshi jumps. Toshi doesn't hesitate. In the seconds it takes Izuku to reach them, Toshi's pushing himself into the sludge, as close to Kaken as possible. Toshi has his arms wrapped around their friend, feet planted and waiting. Blast radius! Izuku shouts and drives his everyday carry taser into the motherfucker's eye, because something in there has to be solid and meat is a good place to start. The shock should carry well, with this villain being made of water. He presses the trigger and the villain screams like they're being thrown into the pits of hell. It's not even that strong a shock, definitely not strong enough to put his family out of the fight, and Toshi bears the electricity and kicks back and ducks and rolls. He's pulled Kaken out too, the other boy scrambling on the ground. Toshi turns, propped on his elbows and ready to move. Izuku tosses Toshi the bottle and cuts the shock and dashes out as the villain comes back to themselves a bit. "Hey fugly loser!" Toshi shouts. "What did you call me?" They screech. Anything vital goes in the fucking bottle. They slurp in fast. 2-3 seconds at most. The control is lost the second Toshi slams the cap down and twists, but the split-second confusion is all he needs. The cap is down. The bottle rattles. Izuku tazzes the bottle. It stops rattling. Kaken has finished hurling up sewage and stands shakily. Grinning madly, Izuku holds up a hand and the 3, somewhat sheepishly because they are in public, complete a 3-way high five that had taken hours of practice to get right reliably. He sees All Might standing in the crowd. He winks and grins and maybe sticks his tongue out just a little. Everyone's staring in silent shock. The police get there pretty quick after, bundling up sludge into trash bags. There are reporters and photographers, and there's a crowd just trying to get a good picture. All the flashing lights are hurting his eyes. Kamui Woods is right there, and Toshi and Kaken let him hand the bottle off to the guy because they know he's a huge fan. Izuku's sure he's blushing a little. The familiarity of Mokutan is soothing even if it isn't the same. Also, he likes the whole capture not kill thing. A lot. The bottle rattles. He hands the hero his taser too. He has several. Better this not get out of hand. The hero accepts it with obvious reluctance. The heroes look like they really want to scold them. Except the 3 of them fine. Kaken is gargling a sun-baked sports drink from his backpack to get the sewage out of his mouth, but that's the worst of the damage. And, quirk usage had only been defensive. They have tons of witnesses to prove it. And that isn't illegal. All Might is boring a hole into his back. They're going to be all over the news, so they head over to his place because his Kachan is the best in the whole wide world and she'll freak out a lot less than Kaken's parents will. She might get a bit weepy, but he thinks mostly she'll be proud. Kaken has to call his parents once they get to his house, but it should be fine. And then All Might slams around a corner and asks for a private moment. His friends backs off. If it's important, he'll tell them. He's planning to already. The hero makes a big show and starts spitting blood and deflates, and he wonders if heroes are as a whole any more sane than shinobi. 'Cause it feels like so far the answer is no. He's only met 2, Eraserhead and All Might, and they're about as opposite as people can get in terms of personality, so maybe he should hold off final judgment until he meets more. Maybe. "I wanted to thank you," All Might says. "And talk about your question earlier." Izuku perks up. Visibly. He's bouncing a bit. Training secrets. Believe it. If you hadn't told me about your dreams, if you hadn't run into that fight, I would have been a worthless bystander. I barely made it in time to see. If you hadn't finished things so handily, I was ready to step in. But I couldn't, I wouldn't have done anything, not until I saw the way you moved. He sounds solemn and guilty. Izuku rubs the back of his neck and laughs awkwardly. It's my fault anyway. I shouldn't have knocked the bottles out of your pockets. And they're my friends. Even if it meant nothing in the end, I couldn't stand back and do nothing. I'm sorry I messed up your capture. You wasted time for me, and I almost made you do it again. I'm not done. The hero's serious, solemn, patient. This feels like a new teacher's special jutsu moment. You told me you didn't have a power. So when I saw this bright, quirkless boy try to save a life, to succeed with such amazing gusto, it inspired me to act too. This is my act. It's sunset and everything is golden and it's so dramatic, so perfect. This is definitely a new teacher's super secret ultra jutsu moment. He just can't quite figure out how. There are stories about every hero, how they became great. Most have one thing in common. Izuku is buzzing. He has so much energy that containing himself to bouncing a bit faster is really all he can do. Their bodies moved before they had a chance to think. Almost on their own. He thinks of Sasuke, he thinks of Neji, and his heart agrees even if every shinobi instinct rages against the notion of reckless self-sacrifice when there could be other options if he could just slow down a second, could just think. He knows that's not always how it is. Sometimes, there's nothing to do but move. Izuku nods solemnly. And today, that's what happened to you. It isn't the same. Not quite. Because Izuku knew he would never fail to move if his precious people were in danger. He had made a decision even if it was the only one he would ever make. He knew that with his head and his heart. It probably looked that way to All Might. But he had trained. All three of them had. Then again, he'd have done it even if they hadn't. Even if he had been a weak civilian, he'd have done it. Because doing nothing in the face of suffering? He couldn't even think about standing still. Young man. You, too, can become a hero. And Izuku nods, solemnly, with great weight, because yeah, of course he already knew that, but everyone had to take the opportunity to give him a dramatic, super cryptic speech before they got to any of the real shit. When he gets students of his own, he'd follow this honorable tradition with pride. I deem you worthy of my power. My quirk is yours to inherit. What? Walla away it? All Might cackles like Tsunade with someone else's money to loose. You should see your face right now. Don't worry, I'm not gonna force this thing on you. He raises a single finger to the sky dramatically. Listen well, young man. This is your choice. Do you want to accept my awesome power or not? The blood that comes gurgling up as he's talking is not helping his argument. But Izuku has never been one to steer clear or ominous warning signs, cryptic bullshit, or mega awesome powers. He had wanted to prove quirkless people could be heroes too, and he would have, but he isn't an idiot. On the battlefield, principles all go straight to hell. Any advantage one can gather is vital, is a necessity. Hell yes. He shouts, matching All Might's enthusiasm. There are a couple things you should know about my abilities. The hero's at a more normal volume level now. Journalists always guess my quirk is super strength or some kind of invulnerability. When people ask in interviews, I always make a joke and dodge the question. That's because the world needs to believe their symbol of peace is just a natural-born hero, like any of them. But I'm not. There's nothing natural about my ability. And oh, ding ding ding. Like the Jinchuriki. Except, it probably didn't involve sealing or a healing ability. So it would have to get power to store up from elsewhere. Like from the user, from the users. He is aware he's probably visibly vibrating, and he's also aware that All Might probably has a whole thing planned out here, but he's really not good at sitting still for long, and he sticks his hand up like they're in class. All Might laughs and gives him the slight confused go-ahead. Oh, oops, now that he has to find the words and can't use the word Jinchuriki. It's like a bucket, no. It's like a fire, right? Like a big bonfire, and very time you use it the fire burns up some wood. And you gotta keep adding wood or it'll go out, but then that makes it bigger too. He bites his lip. So you pass it on so someone else can keep the fire going. Is it a passive drain? He looks up. What does it do to your lifespan long term? What will it do to your lifespan when you pass it on? Do you pass on the whole, fire or just a bit? Is that why you have to get rid of it? Because you're eating up too much and can't give enough back? He thinks about Nagato and he thinks he might be tearing up a bit. They have that same look. Consumed. All Might is staring at him, jaw dropped open. I had a speech. I'm sorry. Izuku ducks his head, a little sheepish. I get antsy. You're not weirded out that quirks can be passed on like this? He sounds a little lightheaded. Ugh. Izuku thinks of Jinchuriki and of sacrifices and symbols and villages and nations, and it's weirdly comforting that the more things change, the more they stay the same. Not really, no. Please go on. No, you got a lot of that right. All Might looks like he's been bulldozed. Izuku almost feels bad about that. Most of his teachers end up that way sooner or later. Mostly sooner. My quirk's name is One for All. Izuku thinks about Jinchuriki, about a legacy that he's folding into this new life, as well, and grins sharp and fierce and unstoppable. One for All. It's a better name than Sacrifice. The man stares at him. He waits. Wait. I'll do it. And I'll be the best hero ever. I'll save everyone. Believe it. Alright, first we need to do something about that weak body of yours. Izuku takes off his uniform jacket and then his undershirt. All Might is spluttering until welts. His whole body is a callus. He doesn't work out for vanity, he trains like a shinobi. His muscles are toned and compact, only just bulky enough that with a baby face like his, in the right clothes he just looks a little squishy. He isn't. Not much at least. He thinks it's fair to say he's much better fed than he was in his last life around this age, for sure. He's strong and tough, and he's had his whole life to train. His stamina, while not Uzumaki level, is probably edging up into Jounin because he doesn't know how or where to quit, and he's had years to build from the ground up and not a lot else better to do. All Might is staring at him like he's just bent a metal pipe, which he hasn't, but depending on composition he can, and then eaten it, which he can't do at all. He grins and does a backflip. He still has to clean up a whole section of a nearby beach. He does his assigned section in 2 months, and working out like that is pretty fun. He gets Kaken's and Toshi's help to do the rest. It's good training. He feels bad excluding them in the first place, but they're the ones that push him out the door with a sigh every morning before dawn when they stay over. Which is often. If they wanted to come badly enough, they just would. He still tries to cut out 1 day a week for his park squad, sometimes a second afternoon too. They still play hero, but it's changed a bit over the years. He collapses a couple times. So do Toshi and Kaken. They give it a good OL plus ultra and keep going. Because Izuku is well aware that his tendency to tell reasonable limits to go fuck themselves is catching. He loves his friends for it. When the rest of the park squad hears what's been keeping them busy, the day after they finish it all, they're impressed and vocally jealous. Not about All Might, he hasn't told them that, but about the fun training opportunity. So, in a roundabout way, they start an unofficial citywide junk removal program that's also unofficially a competition. The city gets a lot cleaner over the next few months. Izuku is proud of them all. And himself. And, apparently, the UA support department has been appreciating whatever they've been able to salvage from the junk. He thinks about asking them to make him some kunai in return before he remembers that he is legally a child and carrying around deadly weapons is frowned on even in trained, adult professionals. Damn. A week after the whole beach is clean, All Might, who had been away for a few days to deal with something vaguely medical, proudly presents him with a single hair. He takes it. He eats it. It's anticlimactic as hell, but then in his experience all the important teaching moments usually are. Unless they're on a battlefield. Which they aren't now. For a while he feels nothing. Hours pass, sitting there, sharing the snacks his kachon packed and idly texting updates to his friends. He's not sure if All Might is aware they know. He should be. It's not like Izuku hides anything from them. Except the past life thing, but he feels like he gets a pass on that. He'll tell them someday, maybe when they get into UA. All Might is a pretty straightforward guy. And a little oblivious. So maybe he just hasn't caught on. He'd insisted they did this ceremony alone, so that was a point in favor of him being clueless. And then he starts to feel something. Something heavy and buzzing, and boy, there sure is a lot of that, huh? So Izuku does what he does best. He charges forward with absolutely no thought to any consequences whatsoever. He pulls. The energy comes into his body, and maybe it's all the meditation he's done over the years trying to find any semblance of chakra, but he can feel it. It's heavy, physical, dense, and powerful, and only kind of comparable to chakra. They're both energy, but this one is different. Honestly, it feels more like sage mode. Like the chakra of living things, of the air and the earth, but centered somehow. Human. He lets it fade, but there are echoes in his body still. Not pathways, exactly, but it follows the natural lines of his blood and his bones and his muscles. He sinks a little of it into his body, a 20th roughly, and even that's probably not a great guess. He learned about dense, overbearing power from a 9-tailed Biju of destruction, goddammit. That tends to beat going a little bit at a time into your head. He still has to remind himself to go slow. So, he pulls the energy in and holds it. Izuku stands slowly, moving carefully and putting very little power into his limbs because he doesn't want to topple headfirst into the sand like an idiot. And then he jumps, spiking it through his legs like chakra. It doesn't work the same, doesn't flow the same, but he still pushes off. Which, oh no, that was a bad idea. This was a very bad idea. He is up so high. This was a bad idea. And oh, here comes the ground. Fun. Izuku takes a deep breath and spreads the power through his limbs, hoping that it can help him stick a landing like chakra could, because if not he's screwed. He tucks in. He feels sand whiff along his skin. He tumbles. It doesn't take all the force out of the landing, but it takes most of it. Enough that he's pretty sure nothing's broken. Very bruised, and his shoulders a little fucked up, but not dead and nothing broken. Sand being softer than, say, concrete also probably helped there. All Might is staring at him in shock. Frozen, drink halfway to his mouth. Izuku smiles sheepishly. Sorry for, surprising you like that? All Might clears his throat. It's all right, young Midoriya. I'm sure you had no clue that was going to happen. He did. He totally did. He is not saying that. Instead he says nothing, and just kinda looks away and hopes he doesn't look too guilty. Why don't you try throwing a punch? All Might gestures to the wide ocean ahead of him. Why not? Izuku rears back, powers up hopefully about the same amount as before, concentrates that power until he can feel it buzzing under his skin and punches. The backlash breaks his arm, and definitely tears a couple muscles. Shatters it more like, and fuck, that really hurts. Holy shit. Different than chakra. Oh man, different than chakra. Yeah, maybe it's a good thing Toshi and Kaken aren't here because they would be throwing a fit. All Might isn't surprised though. He goes super buff in an instant, sweeps him off his feet and ow jostles his broken arm. In like 3 long, high jumps they're standing in front of Yue. Why Yue? Not that he isn't grateful, the school is awesome even without many students around. It's an off day for his school, but that doesn't look like the case for Yue, given the students he spots through classroom windows as All Might power walks. Somewhere that is an infirmary. Why are we in a school infirmary and not a hospital? This seems like a reasonable question. All Might sets him down on a bed and deflates. Recovery Girl is excellent at healing quirk-related injuries. The school has many classes devoted to combat and quirk training, so they retain the best of the best. He laughs and grins down at Izuku, sitting on the little cot and nodding. Oh, so like a med-neen. That makes sense. They wait. For a while, he's not sure how long really. There's a clock, but he hadn't checked when they came in, so, not super helpful. At least half an hour. And what have you gotten up to this time? An old lady breaks the silence, walking out from a door in the back and neither looking nor sounding pleased. Izuku is intimidated immediately. Honestly, that bit's about on par with every other medic he's met. All Might's laugh is much more sheepish this time. Young Midoriya here was, finally passed it on then? Poor boy, you had no idea what you were getting yourself into, did you? She tuts and walks over to the bed, leaning on what may be the world's coolest walking stick. And the scariest. It's shaped like a massive syringe, and the glass part even has some kind of blue liquid splashing around in there. He really hopes it's not functional. Izuku doesn't say anything. Partly because no medic has ever appreciated his commentary, and partially because she's only half right. He had some idea. The broken arm thing just came as a surprise. He'll figure it out though. He's good at that. She tuts and pokes and mutters under her breath and reminds him a lot of Sakura. Up until the point where she gives him a big wet kiss on the cheek and he feels like he's just had a lot of those hospital meds that make you really weird and tired and oh, pain's gone. You're both lucky it wasn't worse. She pins them both with a glare that, even as a shinobi, is incredibly effective. Or, maybe it's worse because he's a shinobi. There's a fear in the core everywhere of mednines that most civilians think is overplayed or made up. It's not. Medics are terrifying, powerful forces of nature and are not to be angered. Sakura, Tsunade, Shizen, Kabuto, Chio, absolutely terrifying. That they usually also specialize in something terrifyingly control-heavy does not help either. Hospitals are the only safe place on the battlefield or during an invasion because absolutely no one wants to be cut down by a half-dozen vengeful mednines. There were two groups that knew the human body inside and out and how to manipulate it, the medic corps and torture and information. Umbu hopefuls had to spend 2 months in one or the other before you could join. Both were regarded as equally scary. Yes, ma'am. He nods. This is traditionally the right response. She HRMs at him and fetches a sling. Don't stress anything for a few days and you'll be fine. And remember not to practice with your quirk unsupervised. Izuku is so glad that worked. And you, she turns to All Might. Do a better job with your student. I had better not see either of you in here again before the entrance exams at the earliest. Yes, ma'am. All Might nods like his head is about to come off. Good to know she's terrifying generally and that he isn't an exception. I'll walk young Midoriya home. She nods her approval and offers him a mint. He takes it. He doesn't eat it. Because he's probably just paranoid, but there are enough mednines out there who specialize in poisons that he wouldn't doubt this school nurse capable of mixing sedatives into her sweets to get him to rest. It's happened before. And this time, he doesn't have demon chakra to burn it out of his system. He's a little wobbly when he stands up, but he's punched well above his weight class with severe blood loss and enough demon chakra in his system to literally burn his skin off, so the wobbles don't last long. Plus ultra and all. The walk back through the UA campus is better than the one in. He gets to see more, now that they aren't in a rush and he isn't being swaddled like a baby. Most everyone is still in class. He does pass a few students in the hallway that throw them curious glosses, but they hurry along without saying anything. It looks like a nice school. He can't wait to go here. I'm going to be teaching here next year. All Might announces as they close in on the gates. Foundational hero studies for the first years. That'll be pretty cool, having you as a teacher. Izuku nods. Kaken and Toshi are going to be so excited. I'm already your mentor, young Midoriya. All Might doesn't pause, exactly, but he does turn a serious look towards him as they continue. Promise me you will be careful with that quirk. As you saw, you can seriously injure yourself if you try to do what you did today again. Do not use it without supervision. I'll be careful. Izuku promises, determination setting the lines of his face. And I'll master it in no time flat, believe it? He intends to be careful. Careful does not exclude practicing. And supervision is fine too. Kaken and Toshi can help him figure things out before the entrance exam. They still have about 3 months before then. All Might nods at him. I'm glad you're taking this seriously, young Midoriya. We can meet up to practice once a week. Channeling one for all can be straining on your body until you acclimate to it. When you get into UA, you'll have more resources available to help you control it, and to patch you up if something goes wrong. He's just getting more and more excited for UA. Hero classes with hero class students, learning to control his super cool brand new quirk with his friends. Sounds perfect. Better than perfect. I'll do my best. He tells All Might, voice heavy with promise and conviction. All Might smiles at him, a real smile, and they make the rest of the walk to the station in serious, contemplative silence. They part soon enough, the rattling of the train soothing him. Izuku has a lot to think about. Mostly, what he's going to tell Kuchin. About the sling and the new quirk and All Might. How to train, too, when he can't just heal a broken bone with demonic chakra. How to channel an overwhelming power when he could end up pulverizing his own body 8-gate style if he doesn't take it slow. He's not very good at slow. Never has been. He pulls out his phone. Hey guys, how do you feel about staying the night? What the fuck happened? We've been waiting for hours for an update, Deku. Kaken is trying very hard to sound irritated and not eager. Toshi doesn't say anything, just grunts, but he doesn't really have to. Izuku is well aware they're both just as excited about this weird quirk journey as he is. Well, see. Shoyuta Aizawa's Monday starts with a bang. The first-year UA teachers are all brought in to learn about the boy All Might has been training to take his place as the symbol of peace. To say he's surprised to see Izuku Midoriya has filed the role is an understatement. Apparently he's a late bloomer and had awoken his quirk in the last year. All Might is sparse on the details, but it seems the two have similar quirks, so the training makes sense, he guesses. Only neither the scar on his shoulder or the memory of that night have faded. Yagi just had to pick the one child Shoyuta is already worried about. Oh, Shuta's sure Midoriya can handle the burden that comes with that of responsibility, that kind of power. Pretty sure. That's actually the problem. Netsu senses his discomfort immediately. Unfortunately. And then suddenly everyone is curious as to how he knows All Might's protege. He explains reluctantly. Extremely reluctantly. It was years ago. 6, I think, maybe 7. There was a general call put out in the area I had been patrolling that night. The operator was half in a panic. A kid had called in, and the situation sounded bad, but they didn't have any details. They just needed someone there, quickly. I was nearby. He takes a deep breath. He's staring down at his hands. Hizashi knows the story, and under the table his knee knocks against Shuta's, a quiet show of support. He doesn't smile, but the tension eases in his chest a little. I could hear the kid before I could see him. He was talking to someone. Another kid in the alley. It sounded like he was scared, hurt maybe, but he didn't sound panicked and I didn't hear crying. As soon as I got close though, as soon as he heard me, he snorted Midoriya threw a kitchen knife at me. Got me right in the shoulder. Namuri makes a disbelieving sound. He hit you? You? I wasn't expecting it. It was less than a year after I graduated. He sighs. He really hopes she lets this one go. That's not the important part. Shoyuta looks up, looks at the people gathered around the table with him. It's just the first-year teachers, maybe half a dozen of them all together, all pros. He's almost sure they'll all understand what he's going to say without him laying out all the nuance for them. I saw the body a second later. Everyone freezes. Adult male, covered in blood, dead. Yagi takes in a shaky breath. Thankfully though, the symbol of peace stays quiet. I'm not good with kids. We've all taken the classes, I know the basics. I did my best to put Midoriya at ease. Usually it wouldn't work. Shoyuta grimaces. Underground work doesn't really lead to a lot of practice dealing with the public. Midoriya was covered in blood. He was standing over his friend, or crouched over him really. The other kid, Katsuki Bakugo, was injured. I couldn't see where or how with Midoriya putting his body between us. As soon as Bakugo made a noise though, he pauses. It's hard to describe exactly. Midoriya changed. All his attention was on the other kid. He started talking again, bargaining with him. Said he'd let this kid, his friend, dislocate his arm if he stayed awake until the ambulance arrived. His fellow teachers look about as baffled as he felt at the time. And concerned. Which is fair and reasonable. The kid though, Bakugo, he just hummed at Midoriya. I didn't give it much thought at the time. I had a lot more to worry about. They weren't the only two in that alley. He doesn't like thinking about that night. No real surprise why. There was a third kid hidden behind some trash bins. I had to pull his hands away from his mouth so he wouldn't drown in it when he threw up. And Midoriya, he apologized to him. To the third kid. Bakugo refused to let go of Midoriya when the ambulance arrived. He bit one of the paramedics, actually. He laughs softly. It's not a bright thing, but the image of that brat just launching himself at the paramedic, that determination, he gets it. He continues. I brought the third kid in, so I didn't see the other two get patched up. One of the nurses said Midoriya scrubbed himself down with baby wipes so he didn't have to leave Bakugo. Not even to wash the blood off. The one with me, he held on to me but didn't say a word the whole time. Apparently Midoriya didn't either. That's not unusual. Shock messes everyone up. But he'd seen the kid. He will bet anything it was a deliberate choice for Midoriya. The kid I was with just kept tugging on my sleeve and looking all worried and frustrated. When he was done with the nurses and I was done with my stitches, I took him a room over to Midoriya and Bakugo. They were both on one bed, Midoriya sitting and facing the door. The third kid burrowed into him, moved like a damn bullet. Midoriya, he's dashed. He takes a breath. And then another. I don't know how to describe it. But I think if I had tried to touch any of them, or sat next to them, Midoriya would have attacked. Not because he was scared. It was calculated. He would come after me because I was a threat. One he, I don't know, understood. He still remembers those cold eyes. Cold, vicious, ruthless. It isn't an expression a child should ever have. How could he say that? Even Hisashi thought he was exaggerating or misunderstood something. He's not convinced he didn't, but he can't convince himself he made it up either. As soon as the kid was in his lap though, it was like a switch was flipped. The readiness just melted away. Those kids, he wanted them to feel safe. Isn't that a bit of a stretch, Aizawa? Ken grumbles. No, he does not leave room for argument. It's absolutely a stretch, but if they're going to teach these kids right, then he has to say it. Midoriya is smart, probably more than a little self-sacrificing, and they need to take his education seriously. If you had been there, you would have seen what I did. Shoyuta shakes his head and continues. I asked for their names. We needed to notify their parents as soon as possible. Midoriya gave me his and Bakugo's, but he refused to give up the third kid's name. I pushed a little, but the more I asked, the more agitated he got. Not angry, just sharp. He laughed a little when I gave up. Called the parents. Got them some snacks. By the time I got back, Midoriya was the only one awake. Tsukachi was already at the hospital, I forget why, but he's good with kids. Better than me at least. I didn't know him well at the time, but it was better than waiting for someone else to get there. So, I asked him to help me ask Midoriya some questions. Figure out what happened. Midoriya asked us to be quiet, so we didn't wake his friends up. Shoyuta rakes a hand through his hair. This next part, it wasn't nice to hear at the time and it wouldn't be in better now. The three were heading home after playing in the park and cut through an alley. The villain ambushed them. He'd been watching them at the park. He ignored Midoriya because he was quirkless. Or he was at the time. Midoriya told us the man said he was going to sell them for their quirks. He grimaces. Half because of that, and half for what's to come. Midoriya had a knife in his pocket from some game or craft or something. Midoriya was he snorts. I don't know if you'd call it lucky. He hit the villain's heart. The kidnapper would have been down in seconds. Midoriya didn't have a phone. He had to turn the villain over to get his. Yagi chokes tearfully, quickly descending into coughing. Ectoplasm, next to him, awkwardly lifts a hand halfway up to help and then drops it. All Might looks like he would come away with 3 broken bones from a pat on the back, so maybe that's a good idea. He called the emergency line and Shoyuta shrugs tiredly. Even retelling this has worn on his energy reserves for the day. Then I showed up. He knew the villain was dead. Tsukachi tried to tell the kid he was in surgery, but Midoriya shot that down in an instant. And he's not sure about this. Not sure if he remembered wrong. But he was shaking the whole time he was talking. He was shaking. But only where he wasn't touching his friends. His hands, his arms, his legs, they were still. He doesn't say anything about the cold, dead look in the kid's eyes when he'd announced that he'd killed a man. Doesn't say that it felt like the kid knew a lot more about what that meant than he should. Doesn't mention the 2 watchful eyes and how fast the shock seemed to fade out of him. Because he'd checked when he left, and as far as he could find, the Midoriyas were as average, kind, and wholesome as they came. Nothing to indicate the kid had been roped into anything dangerous or illegal. And he dug deep. Young Midoriya? Yagi looks heartbroken. To think that such a determined, happy young man has faced such tragedy already. Yes. Nedzu agrees cheerfully. His teacup is trembling faintly, and his smile is broader and toothier than normal. He's angry. He sounds like he's going to be a wonderful hero. Recovery girl shatters the atmosphere in the room. Namuri shakes herself out of her thoughts, gesturing for the old woman. To elaborate, the boy, he protected his friends first. Recovery girl clacks her cane against the ground for emphasis. We should watch for any self-sacrificial behavior. His quirk is already going to put a strain on him without some damned martyr complex. I agree. We should keep a close eye on Midoriya. Nedza decides. Aizawa thinks it's a little funny. None of them have any doubt that Midoriya will pass, it seems. Friday arrives like a damn comet. Shoyuta had gotten 3 hours of sleep last night after chasing some idiot with a shadow quirk through half the city. UA Hero course exams are today. The written tests they would grade tonight, but the practical. What the hell? Namuri's watching the same screen they all were. They had high expectations for Midoriya. They did not expect this. On screen, a purple-haired teen that Shoyuta recognizes flips over Midoriya's back and uses a plate of metal from torn another bot to decapitate one of the 3 they're fighting. Midoriya takes the opportunity to kick the legs out of the bot and breaks some leg joints with a couple quick stomps. They move on to the next one seamlessly, the Shinso kid already engaging. What the hell? On screen, Midoriya kicks one bot into a second, right in front of Shinso, who wastes no time twisting his opponent's head off. They usually separated kids by school so that friends couldn't team up easily. Hadn't worked here. Watching them is like watching a whirlwind. An incredibly effective whirlwind. Hey, we've got another one. Hizashi points 3 feeds up where 2 applicants are fighting similarly. Denki Kaminari and Mina Ashido, 3 blocks from Midoriya, intervened when another candidate's quirk use had boldly attracted half a dozen bots in the area. Kaminari has his fingers outstretched, thin lighting crackling outwards. The current isn't enough to fry the bots, but enough to make it difficult for them to operate. Ashido's right beside him, back to back, acid cutting like a scalpel to damage joints and weak points. Kaminari is in the mix a second after she's done, physical blows taking the damaged bots out of the mix before his fingers crackle again, freezing the bots back in place for Ashido to make vulnerable. Both teams are comfortable with fighting together. It's not unheard of for students to pair up, but the skill level is certainly above average. Practiced. People didn't fight together like this unless they knew how to, intimately. Midoriya spears a stop sign through one bot's chest. The viciousness and adaptability should be a surprise. It isn't. Not to him. They've cleared the area. They're moving on. Towards Kaminari and Ashido. As soon as Midoriya and Shinso catch sight of them, their speed picks up considerably. Shoyuta holds his breath. He's not sure what they're going to do, but he can't take his eyes away. Midoriya rams his shoulder into the last robot, unbalancing it, and Ashido doesn't hesitate. She's up in a second, boosting off Shinso, who drops into a crouch with only a nod. Ashido's legs twist around the robot's head, pinning it forwards, fingers digging into the joint that connects the head and neck to the body. Acid pours into the shell of the body, she jumps, and Midoriya is there to steady her landing. Shinso has his makeshift shield up and looks ready to defend if it moves again. The room is dead silent. The 2 teams don't greet each other once the 2-pointer falls, however. They share a nod, and Midoriya and Shinso take off again. Kaminari kneels down to the potential student, hands him a first aid kit, something all students receive before the test starts. And then he's moving, following Ashido away from Midoriya. The room takes a collective breath. What the hell was that? Namuri repeats herself, mystified. Aizawa does not know. A stunning display of teamwork it seems. Nizu is following Midoriya's progress. Yeah, but... Namuri sighs, gesturing. Aizawa nods. Yeah, but that looked like training, and none of them had listed hero mentorship on their application forms. Midoriya had a few months of training from All Might, but that had been exclusively to work on adjusting to his late quirk. And it looks like they've all trained together. For a while. A study group? But then one with kids from different schools? You might want to see this. Ken interrupts. On the screens to their right, the second group of contestants are midway through their practical. It takes a second to figure out what he's referring to, but once Shoyuta sees it, it's obvious. Katsuki Bakugo, Hiryu Rin, and Mei Hatsum are clearing streets methodically. Bakugo enters, blasts sparking from his hands, visibly screaming with conviction and rage. He draws the bot's attention. The boy stands in front, tearing through anything that gets close to him. Behind him, Rin and Hatsum provide support. Rin takes out any that give him an opening, launching pale green scales from upper arms covered in them. If any of the robots get past Bakugo, he cuts them down before they can get to Hatsum, forming a defensive barrier with the two one-pointers she's reprogrammed. They clear the street easily. They move on. Hatsum looses a bot and Bakugo falls back, acting as their defense until she can reprogram another that Rin pins for her. Look at that enthusiasm. Hisashi is delighted. The fuck are these kids? Namuri is fraying. It's ridiculous for a reason though. This test is designed to pit them against one another. You get in based on how high your personal score is. He pulls up the 3 team scores. They don't have the highest scores, but as long as they don't lag behind now, they'll all be able to make it in easily. It looks like there's more too. Bakugo's group. One of them is aiming for the support department. Hatsum? Yeah. Majima sounds excited. She had amazing results, especially in the practical. She's probably doing this to boost her score, but she was already near the top of the list of acceptees. UA allowed support and business class students the opportunity to take the hero exam, provided they met the qualifications and passed their own exams first. The scoring criteria for them is different, and they gained points mostly on understanding the task and any notes or observations they turned in. The General Studies exam is 2 weeks out, so everyone that fails to make it into any of the other programs will get another chance. What are they feeding kids these days? Namuri just shakes her head. Shoyuta turns back to watch Midoriya and Shinso. So far he hasn't seen Midoriya use the destructive quirk All Might had described in any meaningful, visible sense. He moves faster and hits harder, jumps higher, but despite Yagi insisting Midoriya's quirk has the potential to rival his, that kind of power isn't on display. It looks like he's pacing himself. Yagi steps around him to get a better angle on the screen. He's been making good progress, incredible even, but he can only use about 3% safely of his potential, and about 10 without breaking anything immediately. He's surprised. It makes sense for such a new quirk, though. Can you tell what he's using right now? Yagi studies the screen. 3, probably. Extended use tends to wear him down. If he wants to keep this pace, he couldn't be using any more than 3%. He doesn't sound very sure. Shoyuta nods. Even if it's a guess, All Might would know best as the boy's teacher. He's suddenly incredibly curious to see how they'll handle the 0-pointer. He checks his watch. Just a few more minutes. Behind him, Majima cheers. No doubt his new star student has done something interesting. I suppose we should wrap things up then. Nedza's hand is hovering over the button that will release the 0-pointer. It's a little early. Hisashi sounds not at all disappointing by this. A little wheedling is anything. There aren't many points left to be collected. I wouldn't want to bore our new students. Nedza hums. Stagger them. Namuri suggests. I'd like to watch all 3 teams react. Snipe nods his silent support of the idea. Shoyuta sighs. Nedzu unleashes the 0-pointer into Midoriya's arena. He takes a step back to see more feeds. Midoriya reacts immediately. He and Shinso share a handful of words, none that they can hear since the feeds don't have sound, and then Midoriya is launching himself up the buildings. Shinso runs towards the 0-pointer, head on a swivel. He barely seems to be paying attention to the giant, instead to his competition. It isn't obvious what he's doing until he takes out a bot aiming at one of the children making a break for the gate. He's covering their escape. Somehow, Shuta's surprised. Midoriya is climbing, bouncing like a flea up the metal behemoth. And he isn't the only one. Kaminari has made himself some kind of grappling hook, or else stole one from one of the fake shops. Ashido takes the low, working quickly to ruin one of the knee joints. Shinso pulls a girl out of the way of some rubble knocked off a building by the giant. She doesn't run though. She steadies herself, says something to Shinso, and the two move. They head forwards from the zero-pointer to the exit, checking the streets for others. The girl, Uraraka Ochako, doesn't look to have whatever training the other four do, but she's learning quickly, and seems to be alright following Shinsu's direction. Midoriya is standing on the shoulders of the zero-pointer. He offers a hand to Kaminari, pulling the other boy up. The robot lurches forwards, unbalanced slightly, but the two keep their footing. Midoriya tears open the neck of the robot, digging in and ripping out wires and apart metal. Kaminari pulls up his grappling hook and passes it to Midoriya. The green-haired boy steps away from the hole, Kaminari taking his place. Midoriya prepares to jump. Kaminari pulls a roll of bandages from Midoriya's first aid kit and ties himself to Midoriya, climbing onto his back. Kaminari extends a hand. They wait. The robot lurches forward. They wait. It takes another step. Shoyuta can taste the tension buzzing through the room. There's a flash of blinding light hanging in the air for a second, and then Midoriya launches. Kicking off the shoulder, to the head, and then pushing off with a monstrous kick that sends the giant toppling to the side. The head isn't caved in or anything, but there's a sizable dent left behind and the momentum carries it sideways. Its knee collapses and he can see Ashido booking it away from the fall. Midoriya is falling, Kaminari's head flopping with the wind. Shuta's heart stops. A grappling hook catches a fire exit on one of the model apartment buildings, and the two are swinging. Midoriya kicks off the brick wall as they hit, decelerating as he bounces off the walls framing an alley. The zero-pointer collapses down a street. Sideways. Avoiding the buildings. He lets out a breath and feels hysterical laughter bubbling in his throat. He tamps it down. They're still students. None of their quirks are particularly strong, not yet. But the tactics. He's seen graduates that aren't half as polished. He chuckles. Beside him, Nemuri's jaw hangs open. When he said he had a team, Yagi shakes his head in disbelief. I didn't expect that. None of them expected that. I'm very excited to see how the other test group does. Nedzu is grinning savagely. He pushes the button. Hey Kaken. Izuku is limping a little but he's got a grin a mile wide. How'd you do against that big one? Recovery girl had fixed the brake, but it was still really tender. I blew it the fuck up. Kaken roars, looking singed and exhausted and victorious. Toshi gives him a solid low 5. Izuku isn't nervous. Really. Not nervous. Except maybe he is just a little because, well, it's one thing going to school with a bunch of civilians he'll probably never see again, who didn't understand him, couldn't. But these people are comrades, or will be, and he just can't get his heart to slow down. And he's fearless in battle, believe it, but would they even like him? What if he's just back to being? It had taken a war to tear down the barriers between him and his last comrades. A war. Even when he'd been Naruto Uzumaki the hero, it had still stood between him and everyone. It had hurt. It had been so lovely. He had a team that actually wanted him around now, not one that had learned to work with him because they were assigned to work together and had gotten used to his battle style. Maybe running off with Jiraiya while the rest of them trained together hadn't exactly fostered friendship, but no matter how hard he tried it always felt like he was being kept at arm's length until war had stripped away the luxury of not trusting your comrades with the whole of you. What if it was the same? He didn't have a war this time. Toshi knocked his shoulder against Izuku's but made no move to push him to open the door. Kaken pushed past the both of them and opened it for him, grumbling viciously. Izuku laughed weakly. Inside isn't chaos, exactly, but the tumble of colors and voices and personalities butting up against each other is a comfort. At least two people are yelling and he won't be surprised if Kaken joined in soon. There's still a few empty desks, there's plenty of space left to choose, and Toshi snags his wrist and pulls him towards the windows like a man possessed. Which is also when their entrance is noticed above the din. Taicho, Denki and Mina say as one, clustering close with wide smiles. Denki. Mina. He cheers. If his ears are a little red, it's no one's business, really. It's an embarrassing nickname and not one he'd meant to stick. It had really just been for one game. Taicho? A girl with large eyes and long, dark green hair esquires, head tipped to the side. Karo. Yeah. Denki is thrilled. Taicho is the best. He's our hero trainer. Ah. Izuku scrubs the back of his neck. They're really just games, guys. Games, Karo? Mina knocks a fist affectionately into his chest. He's just humble. Taicho is the only reason we passed the exams. You would have made it on your own. He tries to deny it, he really does. It's their own skill. Unfortunately, they've attracted a lot of attention. It is nice to meet you. A tall young man marches over and bows to him at a perfect 90-degree angle, then snaps upright. I am Tenya Ida. A chopping motion emphasizes the statement. You as well. Izuku's bow isn't nearly as impressive, but it's the thought that counts. I'm Izuku Midoriya, believe it? Do 3 train together? Tenya inquires directly. The 5 of us, actually. Toshi butts in, tossing a hand loosely in Kaken's direction. The blonde grunts and makes no effort to engage in the conversation, content to stare out the window like he's not paying attention to the conversation even though Izuku can see the way he traces the movements of their reflections and notes that he hasn't turned off his hearing aids yet. Wow, it's so cool that you got training before you got accepted. A soft, bubbly-looking girl with the warmest brown eyes he's ever seen peeks around Tenya. I'm Ochako Uraraka. I wanted to thank you, actually. She turns to Toshi with a light blush. Thank you for helping me in the exams. No problem. Toshi shrugs and looks anywhere but her, not really used to being the center of attention. It's not like it's official training or anything, we just meet up in the park and work together a couple times a week. Karo, I'm Tsuyu Ajui, call me Tsu? The long-haired girl waves. That sounds really fun. The door slams open, banging against the wall like a thunderclap. Get to your seats and settle down. The class hurries to obey, scuttling and crashing into each other in their haste. He didn't even raise his voice. Izuku has stars in his eyes even before he recognizes the man as Eraserhead, which takes all of 2 seconds. Then he has double stars. The man, who looks like he's just come off week-long stakeout, steps up to the podium. There's a yellow sleeping bag under one of his arms. Welcome to UA's hero course. It took 12 seconds for you all to shut up. That isn't going to work. Rational students would understand that. Oh my god, it's Eraserhead. Mina squeals somewhere to his right, no doubt trying to be quiet, but in the totally silent classroom it's broadcast pretty far. If anyone ever thought Isuku wasn't going to glorify the work of underground heroes to anyone who would listen, they'd be wrong. Eraserhead looks at them like Shikamaru looked at idiots who were over an hour late to relieve him of his watch. It's familiar and warm and Izuku beams. Do you think we can get his autograph? Denki whispered to Mina, not at all subtle. Oh man, you think he knows Spider Queen? Mina's been in love with the underground since she saw her costume, a glorious mess of tattered black and purple fabric that played into her mutation quirk instead of hiding it or pretending it didn't exist like most costumes, and normal clothes, did with mutation quirks. There's a sound like someone kicking the leg of a desk and Izuku will bet anything that's Kaken telling them to shut up. Eraserhead continues like he's reading off a script. Hello. I'm Shoyuda Aizawa, your teacher. He pulls a gym uniform, or something like it, out from the podium. Right, let's get to it. Put these in and head outside. Now, Izuku isn't sure what the secret of this second test is, but he knows there is one. There's always a hidden meaning. Kaken and Toshi, who have been soaking in his opinions about cryptic teachers almost since the cradle, obviously agree. How are we handling this? Kaken's shoulder is almost pressed up against the back, his voice quiet so as not to be overheard. He still has a smug little grin from launching the softball off like a rocket. He said anything goes? Can't be this obvious. Hitoshi narrows his eyes in Eraserhead's direction. I'm pretty sure it's about teamwork. Izuku nods. It has to be. It always is. Mostly. Almost always. There's a better chance that it is than that it isn't, as far as he's concerned. Eraserhead doesn't have a quirk that enhances his physical capabilities, so it can't be about that. So, be smart and work together. Got it? Yeah, he didn't say we couldn't work together explicitly. Denki trots up, Mina next to him. Gotta be. Mina smiles like she'd really like something between her teeth to tear. His head is buzzing with ideas. If they can do it together, that will be better for all of their scores. Eraserhead smiling like he'll go through with the threat, like he'll really expel someone. Izuku's positive they will, but also pretty sure that the scores themselves aren't the point. His little speech about it being a hero's job to combat unfairness only cemented the idea that there was something more to this. First test is a dash around the track. Aizawa-sensei announces. First up dash. Can we go first, sensei? Mina interrupts, which Aizawa-sensei does not look happy with. But after a minute he nods. Good job, Mina. Denki beams at her. Oh, it's nothing. Mina gives him a cheesy thumbs up. What's the plan? Kaken growls. He takes a moment, different options clicking through his head. Toshi and Denki were the two at a disadvantage here, since neither of their quirks could be used for speed. But, Mina, you're in front, lay down a slip and slide for us. Mina nods seriously, posture correcting to something attentive and coiled. Kaken, you're in the back, I need you to blast us forward as fast as you can. We're relying on you to keep our momentum consistent. Kaken grunts an affirmative. Denki, you can brace Mina the best, so I need you behind her. Toshi, I'm gonna need your help steering since the track is an oval. With the momentum we're gonna build, we need someone with your reaction speed directing us. And I need you to keep Kaken attached to the group once we get going. Both of them nod, sharing a covert fist bump. I can launch us, and keep us from crashing hopefully. He thinks he's worked out how, assuming it works. Ready? Yes, Taicho. The group shouts as one. He goes bright red, still hasn't managed to shake that, and ignores Kaken's snickering. He only does that because it makes him flustered. Aizawa-sensei eyes them like they might bite as they line up as the starting line, each in their own places. Start. He clicks the stopwatch. In a split second, they're in position. Toshi in the middle, Denki's arms around him, yellow-haired boy with his back against Mina's to support her. Kaken's arms are out and back, and he's crackling already. Izuku extends his arms, charges up, and claps. The wind launches them forwards. It's only Toshi's quick warning that has him redirecting them seconds later around the curve of the track. The pop-a-pop of Kaken's explosions can barely be heard over Mina's whooping joy. They're at the finish line in seconds, beaming and windswept. Aizawa-sensei looks absolutely exhausted. The class is gobsmacked. Yeah, you can't do that? A blonde boy with a super cool tail speaks up, sounding like he's pushing the worlds out one by one. It is an individual exercise. Aizawa-sensei drawls. No, it isn't. Denki shakes his head. You never said it was. Underneath the underneath. Hitoshi imparts sage wisdom. Aizawa-sensei looks at them. Just looks. Utterly inscrutable and utterly exhausted. Izuku swallows. Was the hidden message not teamwork? The teacher sighs explosively. Fine. Let's just get this over with. Next group? The rest of the class looks incredibly reluctant to step up to the track this time. Each take their place tentatively and share glances with each other. A few paces off, he can see Tsu and Uraraka whispering to each other. Izuku cheers. He got it right. There isn't a lot of teamwork this time, but that's probably expected since the rest of the class don't know each other well. But he hopes the willingness to try is enough to keep them from getting expelled. His team keeps it up though when they can, boosting each other over the high jump, making sure no one falls off the rock wall, giving each other something to launch off of for the long jump. The ones they can do on their own they complete without issue, and none of them are slouches in endurance at the least, but they all have weaknesses and supporting each other to be better is what a team does. Tsu and Uraraka and Tsu help each other when they can, slingshotting around the track in zero gravity with a super cool move he's absolutely going to have to write down in his notebooks later. Tall girl with long black hair makes a few pieces of equipment for a boy with a crow's head and an even taller boy with muscles like Killer Bee. They both trade her snacks for the help, which must have something to do with how her quirk works. It makes sense, you can't make something out of nothing after all. A boy with a mutation quirk that makes his skin look like stone, or tree bark maybe, acts as a general helper even if there isn't much others seem to be able to help him with. Tenya carries a girl with cool hair and really long ears through the first test very awkwardly. She trades the tall girl some chips for ice packs that she helps Tenya press to his engines in between tests. And through all of it, Izuku's team cheers their classmates on with enthusiasm. Most of class is pretty quick to join in, though some seem a little confused. The teacher had treated this like a competition, after all. There are a few holdouts. The boy with the ice quirk stiffly avoids talking to anyone. Mashireo, the one with the tail, seems determined to get through the test on his own. To uphold his honor, he says, and Izuku cheers for him extra hard because he can definitely respect that. This is way better than what he thought school was going to be. Uraraka and Tenya even promised to sit with them at lunch. It's such a relief. He feels something unwind in his chest with each test, each cheer he raises for a comrade. Aizawa-sensei watches in silence. Izuku takes the lack of reprimand as a success. Hell yes. Toru, a girl with a fantastic invisibility quirk, comes in last by a hair. Aizawa-sensei doesn't expel anyone though. He calls it a logical ruse. It's awesome. Shoyuda? Hisashi inquires with great concern. How was the class? Shoyuda doesn't bother removing his arm from where it's flung over his eyes. The couch in the staff lounge is very cozy and he has no intention of moving anytime soon. He makes a miserable noise in response. These kids are going to kill him. The stress, the shock, will do him in before a villain gets the chance. Hisashi, being a villain himself deep down, Shoyuda uses his free arm to sweep at the man's legs. He just laughs harder.